Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on Monday the 28th of August. Today, the Home Secretary calls for a crackdown on petty crime. She says the police must investigate every theft.
Nearly a third of councils in low-income areas are considering bankruptcy, as a leading local government warns some local authorities have nothing left.
Donald Trump faces another court milestone today when the Fulton County District Attorney lays out her arguments relating to attempts to overthrow the 2020 election.
Half of foods in our diet can lead to strokes and heart attacks. That's according to new studies. Experts say the research into ultra-processed foods should be a wake-up call to the country.
And moving to something a little more healthy, World Athletics Championship came to an end yesterday. Our most successful in 30 years. Liverpool left it late against Newcastle, and we will be talking low blows.
Oh. And we'll have your latest weather forecast.
Good morning. It's a bank holiday for most of us today. Will the weather spoil things? Find out in a little bit.
Good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
We need to be happy this morning. It's Bank Holiday Monday.
Yeah.
How do we stay happy and live long?
Apparently, it's very, very good for you to laugh. Very, very good for you to laugh, which means we could live forever, I think.
Well, when I work with you,
when we work together, we do an awful lot of giggling, as you very well know. Hopefully there'll be lots of that this morning as well. But this is a study from Brazil that shows that laughter therapy can help to reduce inflammation and therefore decrease the risk of a heart attack and a stroke. So laughter therapy, they think, could be implemented in institutions like the NHS.
Oh, how you force it, I don't know.
You need to get comedians on the ward or something.
They sit you in a room with a carry-on. Carry-on movie's 65 years old today.
Is it? Happy birthday.
There's the thing. And it's like if you're a long-time reader of the Reader's Digest, they've had a column for donkey's years called "Laughter is the Best Medicine."
But they say that,
right.
don't they? Laughter is the best medicine.
Well, it's all true.
Well, yeah.
Mind you, Britain's oldest man, John Tinniswood, morning John.
Morning, John.
Who is 111 years old. So what's he done to stay alive for 111 years?
Laugh.
No, fish and chips.
Very British.
Fish and chips and doing things in moderation. He had his birthday on Saturday. He got a birthday card from the King and Queen.
Oh, isn't that lovely?
Which is very nice. And he's had telegrams, of course, from Queen Elizabeth for his other birthdays. And he met her twice, actually.
Oh, how lovely.
There you go. And I like this, because he's an old romantic, is John Tinniswood. He said his most precious memory was marrying his wife, Blodwyn, in 1940...
Blodwyn?
Yeah, Blodwyn must be Welsh, I should think. 1942. And he retired in 1972. He retired before I was born.
Wow, it's a long retirement, isn't it?
Good on you, John.
But down to a chippy tea. I love that. Is that not the most British thing you've ever heard?
If that doesn't give you a bit of hope, nothing will.
Yeah.
So there you go. Anyway, away from the nice stuff, should we have a look at what the Home Secretary has planned for us this morning? Because actually, this could be really positive news if it can be implemented. She's told the police they must investigate every theft, saying the ignoring of low-level crime is unacceptable.
Yes, Suella Braverman has secured agreement from all of the country's 43 police forces to pursue every offence where there is a reasonable line of inquiry.
Well, it follows concerns that theft has essentially been decriminalised due to the extremely low rate of cases being solved, or even looked into now.
Well, Holly Whitbread is a Conservative councillor in Essex, and she's with us this morning in the studio. Good morning to you, Holly. Really good to see you. So what do you make of this plan?
I think this will be really welcomed by people, actually. The Home Secretary has done well, and this government has done well in terms of increasing policing. They actually hit that 20,000 target, which is one of the key successes of this government. However, people don't feel necessarily safe on the streets, and this is one of the ways that people can. And actually, when people do experience low-level crime, whether it be burglary, people want to know there's going to be consequences.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with this, though, is so one headline sort of says, well, everyone must be investigated. But then it's the caveat is if there is a reasonable line of inquiry, and it's how each force determines what is reasonable, I guess.
Yeah, and I suppose actually the police and crime commissioners, who are those elected head of the police, which often people forget about, it's really their role to kind of set those parameters, but also put pressure on the police workforce to make sure these lines of inquiries are followed and as many crimes are solved as possible.
But there are already so many pressures on the police workforce. I think there is some concern that if you start to focus on the petty crime, if you start to focus on thefts, there is this concern that you're taking that work and that effort away from serious crimes such as rape.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the police force in my local area, which is really successful, and we've got a really good police, fire and crime commissioner, the first fire commissioner in the country. But they've done a great job in terms of kind of county lines, drugs, so just really serious crimes, as well as domestic abuse. But actually, when you talk to people on the street, that day-to-day crime that people experience, they want to know that people are being punished for that kind of crime. So I think this will be welcomed, and it's about putting more pressure. But actually, particularly looking at kind of community policing as well. I know in my council, we actually hire 4 police officers who work directly in our district exclusively, and they can focus on some of this low-level crime to try and to help residents.
I mean, that is the thing. I think there is a valid concern that the more serious crimes must still be tackled.
Absolutely.
You can't take resources away. But for the rest of us, I mean, if you are going to be a victim of crime, the chances are it's going to be low-level crime. And at the minute, all you get is you literally get a police number, a crime number, to use for your insurance. Well, it's not what we want, is it?
Absolutely. I mean, and obviously you don't want to deprioritise the most serious crimes because that's what the police are there to do. But it is that low-level stuff. And actually it has an effect on people's quality of life and the way they live their life. So I think the Home Secretary is absolutely right to do this. The police do have to juggle a lot of priorities, but they have got more resource than ever before. And it's important those police and crime commissioners put pressure on them to make sure that crimes can be solved.
Do you think there needs to be more of a focus on that Bobby's on the beat kind of style policing? Because, many people would think that the police forces up and down the country have been too busy policing Twitter. And it's about time they got to real crime.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you talk to people, they want to see police on the street, and there is you always hear, there's not as many bobbies on the beat as there used to be. Well, actually, we're at the highest level of policing ever, so in principle, there should be. I know in my community, we've really been pushing for that on-the-ground, traditional community policing, kind of those town centre teams policing. So I think people do want to see more of that and kind of less focus on Twitter. You're absolutely right.
We wanted to ask you about this story, which is the front page of the Times this morning. I'll just hold it up. It's the electronic tagging plan to stop migrants from fleeing. We know that this is something that really matters to you in your local constituency.
Yeah, well, this is really good news. I mean, this is important. I mean, when we're seeing some of these processing centres in hotels and communities up and down the UK, we are seeing a number of people kind of fall between the cracks, and it makes a mockery of the system. So this is a plan that will actually put more control on that and make less of that happen to cause less illegal immigration.
It's just astounding to me that it's like it's a headline. It's a plan. Oh, well, if we don't want these people to run away and disappear into the wilderness, then we better track them one way or another.
Yeah.
It's like, well, there's something revolutionary. Why wasn't this done years ago?
It does seem like a common sense policy, and I'm surprised it's not been implemented sooner, but I'm glad that it's finally been put in place, because actually when people are going through that processing, they need to go through the system in a fair way, not come into the country illegally.
Yeah, OK. Really good to see you, Holly. As always, we'll catch up with you a little bit later on.
Thank you very much.
Let us know what you think about, particularly about the petty crime stuff. I just think it's... We call it petty crime. If someone breaks into your house, if you're the victim of a burglary, actually it's really upsetting.
Doesn't feel petty, does it, when it happens to you?
It really doesn't.
No, and I'm sure many people will really, really welcome that, actually, because you're so right. I mean, many people, if you are the victim of personal theft or indeed car theft, most of the time you are just getting a police reference number in order to claim on the insurance. I mean, it's kind of just understood amongst people that you're not going to get that item back. Is that something that's happened to you? Do let us know what you think of that plan. gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, the Fulton County District Attorney, Fani Willis, is set to outline her evidence against Donald Trump at a court hearing today in the US in another legal hurdle for the former president.
It comes after Trump's legal team predicted he will not stand trial on any of his charges until November next year, as the court dates clash with the final stages of the 2024 presidential election.
Well, joining us this morning from Fulton County, Georgia, is Eric Ham, political analyst. Eric, really good to see you this morning. What do you think we can expect from today's hearing?
Well, today's hearing will determine whether or not Mark Meadows, Donald Trump's former White House chief of staff, will actually be allowed to be tried in the court of Fulton County, or will this be a federal issue? Now, of course, a lot is riding on the line here, because determining how this case is determined will decide whether or not John Eastman, who was the architect of all of this effort to try to overturn the 2020 election, if he will also be allowed to actually move his case to the federal level. And then, of course, that gives Donald Trump enormous ammunition to also continue to try to delay these cases.
What's the difference between moving it from county to federal level, apart from the fact, I guess, that if he was convicted and then became president, he could pardon himself if it was a federal crime, couldn't he?
Well, that's true. And also, too, the biggest issue is Donald Trump believes that because, of course, he did appoint a number of federal judges to the bench, that actually gives him a lot of leeway, particularly with judges, because he believes because he appointed them to the bench, then that gives him the opportunity to get cases to move his way. In fact, one aspect of this is to just look no further than the case in Florida, where there are those who believe that the judge has had her finger on the pulse for Donald Trump. We know that she was heavily rebuked by an appellate court. However, if this case does stay within the Georgia court system, that means there are no protections that will be afforded to Donald Trump, even if he is elected president of the United States.
And Eric, it is the most extraordinary timeline that we're starting to see forming before us, isn't it? I mean, we're going to be entering the final stages of this presidential campaign, and Donald Trump is going to be sitting in courtrooms facing trial up and down the country.
That's right. But also, we know that at least one of these co-defendants in this Georgia case has already invoked the right to a speedy trial. Now, we know Fani Willis, the prosecuting attorney, has already, prior to that, she had already stated that she wanted to see this trial, this case go to trial by May of 2024. With Kenneth Chesebro, one of the co-defendants, now invoking this right to a speedy trial, she has actually moved that date up to October of 2023, which means if in fact this case does go to court before in October, we could actually possibly see this case in court even before the first ballots are actually cast in Iowa or New Hampshire. And of course, that could have a tremendous impact on Donald Trump's march to the White House.
Isn't it interesting, though, Eric, that in all of this, we're just talking and assuming that Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee? I mean, it almost seems like a done deal, doesn't it? Which is remarkable.
Well, it certainly does, particularly given how far Donald Trump is leading in the polls. In fact, we just got new information that Donald Trump raised nearly $5 million in the immediate aftermath of his surrender here in Georgia. That's a record for Donald Trump in raising money in just under a day. So what we're seeing here is Donald Trump continues to lead in the polls as well as in the ability to raise money. And right now, none of the other GOP candidates have shown an ability to actually be able to cut into that lead. And so until they can prove that they do, this looks more and more like a coronation and not a nomination.
And how do you think that photo this week of Donald Trump, the first that we've seen, what would I call it? The mugshot. What do you think that's done for Team Trump? What do you think it's done for his base? Or do you think the optics of that have actually changed things for him now?
Well, it certainly does change things for the United States. We're talking about the American democracy, and we're talking about an individual who is now a defendant, a criminal defendant, who is actually leading in the polls for one of the major two-party systems to actually be the next commander-in-chief. So this does, I think, cause and many questions where the United States is headed. But in terms of what it means for Donald Trump, at least in the short term, this is actually, again, a boost to his candidacy, not a detriment.
Eric, really good to see you this morning. Thanks very much indeed. You know, I've never been to Georgia.
Neither have I. Maybe we should do a trip.
But Fulton County, Georgia, sounds like something off a really good American TV show, doesn't it?
But don't you think all of this just seems like it would be very good on a US TV show?
It is like a movie.
It feels like that. It doesn't feel real.
It's like The West Wing or something, isn't it? Or House of Cards or something. I mean, it's just
it makes our politics seem very normal.
We get so worked up now. We get so worked up over a resignation letter.
We do.
Don't we?
And the wording of it and the timing of it.
Yeah, it's nothing compared to the States, is it?
Small fry. Yes.
Oh, dear. Anyway, look, today, believe it or not, marks 2 years from Britain's withdrawal from Afghanistan following NATO's 20 years in the country.
Well, dozens of countries evacuated their forces from the country after the Taliban retook the capital, Kabul.
Well, let's talk to Veterans campaigner Trevor Coult, who fought in Afghanistan. Good to see you this morning, Trevor. I mean, it was such a disheartening thing when that withdrawal took place. I mean, particularly for a lot of the veterans and the families of those who died in Afghanistan, just to see us walk away. I mean, where do you think we are 2 years on?
We're nowhere, really, Stephen and Ellie. We went backwards. You have to remember that we were invited. We were invited by the president of Afghanistan to come over and help him defeat the Taliban at the start. So we went there to help them out, and in the end, we handed it back to them. Now, while we were in Afghanistan, I can assure you that every single person that we caught, we had captured, that had killed British soldiers, who had killed our allies, never got prosecuted anyway. The Afghan authorities did not recognise biometrics. They didn't recognise iris scans and fingerprints. So even though we had all the proper things put down to put these people in jail for years, every time they went through the Afghan authorities, they were released. So I hate to say it, but I lost some good friends out there. But, you know, I do sort of think it was a complete waste of time. We've lost so many people out there, and for what?
And what do you think when you look back at the extraction, the international withdrawal from Afghanistan? I mean, most would agree that it was an absolute disaster in terms of planning and in terms of execution. We're just seeing some videos there of the desperate people trying to scale the walls of Kabul airport. We all remember those scenes, don't we? And people desperately clinging to aircraft trying to take off. What are your reflections now about the actual withdrawal?
Well, let's be honest, was it 13 or 14 US Marines were killed during the extraction? And that was all down to the President of the United States, who actually had did an underhand deal with the Taliban and didn't actually tell any of his allies. And we're meant to be his best ally. Oh, the UK, you know, we're like that. No, it was a complete cluster. I won't use the other word, but he destroyed it. I've never known in my whole time for a country to keep a secret and not tell its friends and allies, we're about to leave, don't tell the British. Do you know what I mean? It was a disgrace. And if I'm honest, I said this to your producer yesterday, I don't understand why the UK works so closely with the US. I mean, I'm going to be honest, we have great intelligence, we have great soldiers, we have great abilities. We don't need them, and it's about time we stood on our own 2 feet and we said, to hell with the US after the way it's treated us.
I mean, I guess the problem is, when you look at something like Afghanistan, that it's about the numbers, isn't it? And we aren't strong enough, are we, as an armed forces? Now, we know the armed forces numbers are so down at the moment, and resources and financial backing is low. I mean, it really needs to be lifted. We are in a position where we just can't operate on our own, can we?
Stephen, that's a great point, but we would be able to operate on our own if our peers in the House of Lords and our politicians would let us. Over the last 2 or 3 years, we have seen our politicians deliberately dwindle away our armed forces. in order to keep us in this new fancy European Union type military defence. So we're deliberately dwindling away our armed forces. We're cutting away regiments still. I mean, thousands of regiments being cut away, being amalgamated. Our own politicians are ruining our country.
Trevor, when you look at Afghanistan now as a country, especially when you think of women and young girls in that country, how does that make you feel? Because you obviously served there. Do you feel as though in that time you made a difference? Or do you feel as though that was all a waste, looking back?
Well, Ellie, when we were there, we were making a difference. When we were there, we provided security, we provided assistance. We helped build schools. We helped build hundreds of wells. We brought over products, pencils, pens, calculators. We helped these young girls find an education, get an education. And the minute President Biden pulled out, the Taliban took over, and all these things that women and young girls were aspiring to be got cancelled. So, and I find it quite strange, actually, that in today's woke culture, where feminists are jumping all over the back of every man that wants to speak out, there's no feminists jumping out at the minute and saying about these young girls. Not a single feminist has jumped out and said, what about the girls of Afghanistan? Because it doesn't suit their agenda, Ellie.
No, well, it's all very troubling, isn't it? The final point, as you know as well as I do, 454 people, British people, lost their lives from 2001 onwards in Afghanistan. It's important. I mean, I know you say, why were we there? What difference did it really make in the long term? But it's important, isn't it, not to think that these people died in vain fighting for Queen and country.
Stephen, it's very hard not to think like that, though, when you look. And the one thing which we don't talk about is we've actually lost over 1,000 veterans from suicide because of the trauma they gained in Afghanistan. So we forget about that as well. But yes, it's a hard pill to swallow to think, yeah, let's not think of them in vain. But, you know, the way things are going today, it's hard not to, Stephen.
OK, Trevor, really good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Apologies for me, I've got a frog in my throat.
You need a cup of tea in here, I think.
I do need a cup of tea. Look, it's very difficult what Trevor says, and I'm not disputing what he says.
No.
But it's very. I mean, as you know, my brother-in-law died in Afghanistan 10 years ago when he was 21, and you don't want to think that he died in vain.
No.
And certainly the family and my mother-in-law and everything, my husband, you don't want to think that happened.
No.
It's very difficult when there's not a finished solution to it all.
I remember once, at the time, actually, 2 years ago, speaking to another veteran who served in Afghanistan, and he said, if anything, we gave the people of Afghanistan, especially the women and girls, hope. We gave them hope, and we showed them what life could be or what their possibilities were, what they could achieve in their lives. Even if that might not be now, they're aware that there's another world out there where things could be different.
Yeah.
And that's something, you know, hope is something to fight for, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So there's another opinion for you.
If you've got thoughts on that, gbviews@gbnews.com. Let's have a look at the rest of today's stories. At 6:23, and senior Tory MPs are calling for an end to party infighting after Boris Johnson acolytes Nadine Dorries handed in her long-awaited resignation with that scathing attack on Rishi Sunak over the weekend. She accused the Prime Minister of presiding over a zombie parliament, betraying Conservative principles and having no mandate from the people.
High street chain Wilko could be saved from collapse after a last-minute rescue bid was launched. Wilko collapsed into administration earlier this month, putting 12,500 jobs at risk across its 400 stores. Private equity firm M2 Capital has submitted a last-minute bid worth £90 million and said it plans to guarantee all employees jobs for 2 years.
Two major studies that have shown that ultra-processed food significantly raises the risk of heart disease, heart attacks and strokes, with experts warning it needs to be a wake-up call for governments worldwide, well, for us as well, so it would seem. Prevalence of heavily processed items like ready meals and fast food has soared in recent years, with apparently such products making up well over half of the average diet in the UK. Got to be aware of that, actually.
We do need to be aware of that.
But what counts as ultra-processed food. Just having a burger, a frozen burger or something, does that count?
I think so, yeah. Well, we'll have to read into it. Well, it's half of our diet, apparently. So it's very bad. It's on most of the papers, though, front page of the Mirror this morning.
Sorry, darling,
but
I just threw all over you.
That's all right, don't worry. You cook most of your food from scratch, don't you?
Well, sometimes...
Very good cook.
I do try.
It's our Stephen.
Well, I try to be healthy, but the problem is that then every now and then, like last night, we had frozen pies.
And that will be very processed.
And it will be processed, but by it, they were tasty.
Were they?
They were really nice, yeah.
What flavour?
They were the Linda McCartney ones.
Oh, yeah, they're quite good, to be fair. Linda, she never...
She never lets you down, doesn't Linda?
Yeah, no.
But are they ultra-processed? I mean, that's meant to be, because she was all like... her and Paul, very,
Her and Paul?
vegan, or with the vegetarian, but they were, very strict. She was very strict. So would you then say, would that food then be ultra-processed? Because they're meant to be, like, really on the health side.
No, you think they'd be healthy? Yeah, well, you're probably all right with that. You're probably all right with that, but other things that you can buy probably aren't so good for you.
You see, there's a picture of a pizza on the front of the Mirror. And you can't argue with a pizza.
Do you know what? There's some things here that you wouldn't expect. Cereals, protein bars, fizzy drinks, ready meals, of course, and fast food.
Yeah.
I'm very bad for fast food.
Things like cornflakes, I was always told as a type 1 diabetic, never eat cornflakes because they're so processed, they enter your bloodstream faster than eating a bowl of sugar.
Really? Well, there you go. And you wouldn't think cereals, would you, if you think of ultra-processed foods?
No, you wouldn't really.
But there you go. Yeah,
So I think it's a healthy little snack, don't you, a bowl of cornflakes, but apparently not. Anyway, we'll try and dig into that a little bit more for you this morning. But we've got Paul Coyte with the very latest sports news heading your way very shortly after the forecast with Craig.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to today, it's a dry and brighter day for most of us. Still a little bit of rain from time to time, but certainly feeling a bit warmer. So we start the day with some mist and fog around, also some fairly grey skies for parts of the Midlands and central southern England, but a lot of us seeing some sunny spells. However, the cloud will tend to bubble up as the day goes on. Also the risk of a few showers, especially across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, maybe even southeastern parts of England. But in the sunshine, feeling a little bit warmer, highs potentially reaching 21 or 22 degrees down towards the south. Into the evening, the showers beginning to fade away, so for a lot of England and Wales actually turning drier and clearer. Still going to see some showers for Northern Ireland and Scotland, especially along this band, which will just spread its way southeastwards as we go through the course of the night. Behind it, some blustery winds piling in behind, but for most, actually, temperatures staying in double figures as we start Tuesday morning. Could just fall down to around 5 to 6 degrees in some sheltered spots of England and Wales. So Tuesday morning, we start off with a mixture of cloud and some sunny spells. Still this line of showers, which will spread its way a little bit further into England and Wales as the day goes on. And then for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a mixture of sunny spells and blustery showers. Temperatures for most of us around where they should be for the time of year, but still feeling pleasantly warm in any sunshine across the southeastern corner.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Still to come on today's programme, at 7:20 as the government's climate change advisors urge Britons to turn off their heating in the evening so we can hit net zero. That's one way of doing it. We'll debate if we should have to compromise our lives to fight global warming.
And at 8:10, we'll investigate reports that Labour could introduce a new road tax in London that costs per mile. Would it be rolled out nationwide?
Yes, charge you per mile.
Not sure about that.
It's a constant war on motorists.
It's a worry.
Drives me mad. Where have you got to drive?
How would you get to work?
Well, it's more those. Well, so you get the tube or get the train. What about if you live anywhere else?
Well, you can't.
I can't. No.
Not
Costs
at
me a fortune.
3 o'clock in the morning. You can't.
No, there isn't.
Had enough of our
They'd had enough.
They didn't care what we were saying. They just decided to cut us off. There you go. We should do that to you, Paul.
I think so. We usually do.
Yeah, thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much. Sport, there's quite a bit going on. Thanks very much. Goodbye.
Yeah, goodbye.
Should we talk about the football first?
Yeah, let's talk Premier League.
Very briefly then, Burnley 1, Aston Villa 3. Sheffield United nearly got a point against Manchester City because Man City leave it late, because the thing is that's what the good teams do.
Why?
Well, the thing is, when you get supporters of other teams who go, oh, they're so lucky, they always get a late goal, always manage to get a late goal. It's because they keep going till the end. That's why. And this is what happened with Liverpool yesterday. So Newcastle playing at St James's Park, crowd behind them, and they went 1-0 up, and then there was a sending off. Virgil van Dijk got sent off, and thinking this should be fine for Newcastle. And then Liverpool leave it late. Darwin Núñez.
Yeah,
Darwin Núñez.
He's the agent of chaos, isn't he?
That's exactly what he is.
How do you know that?
The agent of chaos. Yeah. Because formerly, weren't you known as the agent of chaos?
Often.
Because
but for different
I was
reasons.
thinking that when I saw about Núñez, and I thought, that's Dixon.
You've heard that before.
That's Dixon. But anyway, a good result for Liverpool away there. And so at the top, so Manchester City are top because of 3 and 3. But I do want to mention the top because Spurs are hovering around the top with West Ham and Liverpool and Arsenal as well.
Why would you care about that, Coity?
Only because Ellie has Tottenham Hotspur leanings. That's the only reason, purely for Ellie, nothing to do with me. You've enjoyed the athletics, haven't you?
I've really enjoyed the athletics. Yeah, I just think it's very good to have on in the background. You can pick it up at any time. You know what's going on.
Being on in the background is a start.
I think so.
Yeah.
And it's entertaining.
I'm hoping it'll be on in the foreground in the future.
Foreground would help. Yeah,
it would. But it was great.
It's really good to look at.
It is. It's just colourful and lots of running and jumping.
It's engaging.
You're not helping yourself here, Costello.
I just think it's quite engaging, quite fun.
Well, it is.
There's lots of different things to look at.
I'll let the Olympic Committee know exactly how you feel about that, and I'm sure they'll be over the moon. So, what do you think? Well, it's engaging and fun. I think it's got a future.
Lots of different things to look at.
But it was our best. It was our best tournament, best World Championships for 30 years.
Was it really?
Because our friend Chris Akabusi, who won gold back in '91, it was one of the. See, if you've never seen this, Chris in the 91 World Championships in the 4x400 metre relay, which we won bronze in yesterday, is a great thing. So KJT, who's Katarina Johnson-Thompson.
Oh, I like that, KJT.
Exactly. She won gold in the heptathlon, and Josh Kerr gold in the 1500 metres. Keely Hodgkinson, who's only 21, another silver for her yesterday in the 800 metres. But I mentioned the 4x400 metre relay. Now, this is interesting because the men got bronze, the women got bronze as well, which was great. But Victoria Ohorogu, who is arguably our finest 400-metre runner, was left out of the team yesterday. Now, there's Victoria there. Now, it's all about a breach of anti-doping rules that actually hangs over her. There's nothing been proven or charged yet, but she was seen training alongside her boyfriend, who is an Italian sprinter by the name of Antonio Infantino, and he's serving a 3-year doping ban.
Right.
So, I mean, if it's a boyfriend, you know, you think you'd be able to run alongside, maybe train, but that would be against the rules. It's called prohibited association. So the fact that he's banned, and if she's seen to be coached by him, even though it's her boyfriend, she would then lose any medal should they have got that in the 400 metres. Do you see what I mean? So they had to decide, now, what do we do? Do we have Victoria run? Because if she's proven that she shouldn't have done this, all the other 3 would also lose their medals too.
Yeah, but if she's tested and there's nothing, she hasn't done anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, it's prohibited association. So because I think it's mean too, because he's banned. And it's because of coaching. So if they can say, oh, yeah, he was running alongside, but I think he was coaching you there, wasn't he? That means you're banned. That's when things get a little bit cloudy, a bit uncomfortable.
Can we talk long jump?
Do you want to get this in now?
I want to get... Oh, do you want to leave it to the end? Is it a special entreat?
It's a special entreat for you.
Entreat, right.
Because it's not only engaging, it's exciting as well. So I think we like that.
Well, in which case, we'll save that for the end.
I think we should.
Well, let's talk. Can we then say, because it's your favourite F1 driver, Max Verstappen.
Max Verstappen wins again. I mean, I'd love to be able to go, oh, it was this and it was that, but in the Dutch Grand Prix, it's his home Grand Prix. They're all singing Verstappen's name all the way through the race, and it was very wet. Everybody was dressed in orange, soaked to the skin. It was his 11th win of the season, 9th on the trot, which equals the record of Sebastian Vettel. So he just keeps winning. You know, another Grand Prix. Another Verstappen.
Well, it's his time.
It is.
Should we talk boxing?
Yes.
Go on, Ellie.
That's all I've got.
Daniel Dubois against Alexander Usyk. Alexander Usyk, who is Ukrainian. They fought in Poland. And Usyk is probably if we look at Tyson Fury, this is the fight that everybody wants to see, Usyk and Fury.
Yeah.
But Daniel Dubois fought him. So, young British fighter, about 10 years difference between the two of them. And then the 5th round, Dubois hits him and...
Well, did he get the crown jewels or not?
Well, it was pretty close to the crown jewels. Now, have a look at this. Now, is that a below-the-belt punch? Because what happened is that...
Well, I don't know about you, Paul, but I would say no.
But then again, has he got a very high-riding waistband there? See, that's the thing, is that usually the waistband has to be below the belly button, although it's covering over, but it doesn't look like a low punch to me. It is very high-waisted, and the fact that punch floored Usyk. So if he was just left, then Dubois would have won the fight. But Usyk was going, oh, no, crown jewels, and it shouldn't be allowed. So he was given about 4 minutes to recover, and he did recover and then went on beat Dubois. Now, Frank Warren, who's the promoter of Daniel Dubois, says, you know, it should be a no fight because he should have won it because it was a fair punch. It wasn't below the belt, it was above, whereas Usyk says it was below the belt. Quite literally below the belt.
Well, he might be slightly different to the rest of us.
I think so. But he did finish the fight talking like this, and I didn't quite understand why. Right, finally then, should we go to the long jump there? I mean, it's been a great World Championships. And Carrie McLeod of Jamaica, one of the finest long jumpers in the world.
Great name as well.
And you know what? You should see this. Have a look at this. Right, we've got... Now, this is when things can actually go.
Oh. So what did he land on there?
Well, he went kind of head first into the sand pit.
But that was it. It just shows the power and the speed and the height that long jumpers can get. And if it just he's okay there. He's okay.
Yeah.
And he was okay with the triple jump. He just missed it. He was injured afterwards. Look at that. I mean, unbelievable.
So the run-up's good. So what happens? He just kind of takes off and lands on his side?
See, the first time I saw this,
first.
I thought it was faked because it looked so crazy, but it goes over for anyone on the radio and sort of takes off, then and it was almost like a head over heels.
It's a bit of a Superman launch.
That's exactly what it was, but it was a no jump because he did put his foot over the board.
Oh.
So, you know, started with the Fosbury flop in high jump, a new style of jumping. Maybe there's something in that for the future. Very dangerous, but it
What,
he
head
certainly
over
got some-
heels?
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Land.
You can take that.
Like that.
If you like.
Okay. Call it the koi.
The koi.
Give it a go.
The koi.
Yeah, I don't really think you can claim.
Okay, well,
that one,
I'd like to
really.
give it a go. Okay.
Koiti.
That's all I got for you. That's all I got for you.
Thank you. Heavens for that.
Thank you very much.
You've run about 10 minutes over your time, but it's worth it.
Thank you. Thank
So
you.
worth it.
There we shall squeeze in the papers with Claire Pearsall and Candice Holdsworth in just a moment.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 6:42. Let's have a look at the papers for you this morning. We'll start. The Telegraph has the Home Secretary's calls for police to investigate every theft.
The Times opens with the Home Office's electric tagging plan to stop migrants from fleeing.
Great British food scandal is on the front of the Mirror, with half of the food in our diets apparently linked to heart attacks and strokes.
Andrew back in the fold, says The Sun. It's got a picture of the Prince travelling to church with William and Kate. Catherine.
Oh, it's Catherine.
I was going for Catherine and we just ended up on Cat.
Yeah. I thought they didn't all get on.
No,
she wouldn't like Cat. No, it's not
She wouldn't like that at all.
And Happy Monday, says the Daily Star. Are we set for an Indian summer? Well, the forecasters say no, don't they? They all say no Indian summer.
But we say yes, please.
We say yes. Bring it on.
Bring it on.
But it's technically, what is an Indian summer? It's something quite technical. It's not just being a bit warm now or in September.
Because I asked Nathan Rao about this once.
Yes, you
and
did.
He said I was all very wrong.
Yes.
It's October, I think, is an Indian summer, so that's not going to happen in this country, unfortunately.
No, it isn't. Let's take you through the papers then in a little bit more detail with former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall and the writer and commentator Candice Holdsworth. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Claire, let's kick off with the Telegraph, should we?
Yeah.
Every theft must be investigated, says the Home Secretary.
Which is a great headline.
Yeah.
I think everybody would get behind that and they would say, yes, we want every theft to be looked at, but we don't have the number of police officers that we require to look at every single theft, whether it be a car, a mobile phone, a laptop, a bicycle. What are we going to do? And you kind of think, is this just grabbing the headlines? Well, the Daily Telegraph have put it on their front page, but how does it work in practice? Do we have enough police officers to actually go to every individual who has suffered a theft and look at footage and go out there and interview suspects and all the rest of it? And you think, is that then going to have an impact on other areas of crime, such as rape, sexual assaults, murders? Are you going to suffer in that area? Because if you don't have enough officers, something's got to have to give somewhere along the line.
But we have recruited more officers, haven't we?
We have recruited more officers, but we are still below what we would need to be able to enact this kind of policy. I mean, I think it's a little bit unfair on the police service as a whole to hold them fully responsible for investigating every single crime.
But she's put a caveat in, though, hasn't she?
Has,
so with a reasonable line of inquiry.
Exactly, and you can see that those kind of words are going to be used as a defence for why they haven't looked into a mobile phone theft, for example. And I do find it frustrating when somebody has had a phone stolen or a bicycle stolen and they've gone to the trouble of tracking it and they know where it is and they give the police all of the details that they have, that they could then reasonably chase that up, and the police say, there isn't enough evidence. And I think that's really frustrating. So I think it does need to be ironed out a little bit more. I think it's unreasonable to expect them, with the resources they have, to go to this kind of length, but we do need to do something, and I think that something is recruit and train more police officers.
What do you make of it, Candice?
Yeah, well, they say they're going to do fewer mental health checks, and apparently that's been pioneered in Humberside. So you have the sort of right care, right person scheme, and they said that does free up a lot more time. So the NHS takes care of people in mental distress more, and then police have more time to investigate certain crimes. And obviously something does need to change, because I think faith in the police has been damaged by crimes that people most commonly experience, these so-called low-level crimes, and they're not being solved. I mean, there obviously is there's practicalities in it as well.
It's not even being solved, though, is it? It's the fact they've just it's looking into it.
Yeah.
Which would be half the battle.
Yes, and like Claire said, people actually end up investigating it themselves. Sometimes you might find your bike that's stolen on Facebook, and you'll see it's for sale, and you'll be able to track down where it is. I mean, even in my community, we've resolved issues on our own. We've had no choice. And so that's what's going on. And I think that will keep going on more and more as people just think, well, there's no point even reporting it to the police.
Well, and yeah, which is where things really start to fall apart.
Yes.
OK, Candice, let's have a look at the front page of The Times, shall we? An electronic tagging plan to stop migrants from fleeing.
I know. So apparently, because so this is front page of The Times, because the backlog has just ballooned, and I mean, it's gone up apparently by about 175,000 people waiting to get their asylum claims processed. They're now looking at ways to keep track of migrants who disappear, and they're looking at tagging as one possible way of doing that. And obviously human rights groups don't like that. They say they're not criminals. But it just shows just how unwieldy this whole system is becoming. You're now looking at, like, highly punitive measures to track people. I mean, Rishi Sunak has said that they want to get on top of that this year, but clearly they're not. I mean, it's ballooned to about $4 billion a year in costs as well.
Yeah. But they're not criminals, no. But however, they're not people with the right to roam freely in this country, are they?
Yeah, no, they're not. I mean, it is illegal migration. But the problem is so this illegal migration act, it can't go ahead until they can figure out when they can start sending people to Rwanda. And that's still being tied up with, obviously, international courts, and they don't know if they'll be able to do it. So all the plans that they want to enact to sort of manage incentives in terms of deterring people from coming here in the first place, they can't do it. And so I feel like the conversation around this is just getting more and more extreme. So they're talking about tagging, they're talking about physically pushing the boats back, because all the legal routes that they want to go down, they can't.
Yeah. But I mean, Claire, for local communities, I mean, when we're looking at the Bibby Stockholm, I mean, a lot of what the community talks about is this fear about, especially men on places like the Bibby Stockholm, absconding or getting out into the local community or committing even petty crime. That's a lot of where this fear comes from. Something like this might help to tackle that.
It might. They aren't criminals, no. To detain them would be wrong. We can't do that. I think there are some benefits. I think perhaps communities would feel that this was a solution being offered up. But also, when you read down into the detail in the article, it says that there aren't actually enough electronic tags out there at the moment to be able to deal with it. And who's going to monitor it? And my concern is that this is now another private contract that gets handed out to a company who doesn't necessarily do that. And we've seen this with companies that deal with prisoners and escorting them to and from courts, and the electronic tagging system, where it falls down really, really badly. So I think that it's an idea. I think communities will probably welcome it in areas that do have concerns. But it does it makes you wonder what they are going to do. What are you going to do if somebody report somebody who's got an electronic tag, they're not actually doing anything wrong? Well, what do you want to do with it?
It'd be geo-tagging, wouldn't it? So you sort of say, well, you can't, you've got a 10-mile perimeter. You can you don't go out the town or whatever, and if you went out, then it'll set
And the
off.
majority of them don't. They don't have anywhere to go, and I think this is largely the problem. We're putting people in an area where there isn't anything for them to do. If they're going to go into a local town, for whatever reason, most of the time doing absolutely nothing wrong, you're tagging people, you're tracking them. I mean, there are arguments on both sides. I mean, my argument on this one is going to be the cost factor and what the effectiveness is going to be.
Well, yeah, you need it to be effective.
Yes.
In the Express, Claire, senior MPs are warning that Tory infighting will gift Labour the keys to number 10. Blimey neck, have they elected Sherlock Holmes?
Wow.
To work this one out?
I mean, who'd have thought it?
I know.
Really, who'd have thought this would ever happen? Divided parties don't win elections, and I've said that enormously lots of times, and I can't ever imagine a sign of weakness that we've got at the moment. We have such a divided party in the Conservatives. There are so many different factions. Everybody gets told to pull together. Nobody does. And I don't think Nadine Dorries has helped. The psychodrama of this weekend with Nadine Dorries and her resignation letter, which apparently did not actually go to the Prime Minister who it was addressed to, but into a newspaper column instead, where he read it for the first time. I think that it's so obvious that the infighting has to stop, but unfortunately I think we are past the point of that happening. I can't see it happening. The factions are now too entrenched in their own decisions, and it doesn't matter who is saying it. It's not going to change.
So they're going to lose, then?
Do you know, I think it's almost inevitable, because you get to this point in the electoral cycle where you are 13 years on, the public are saying, well, what ideas do you have? The party is saying, well, we'd like to do this, and they U-turn on it, or part of their own party says, no, that's a really bad idea, you need to do this. And the public just says, do you know what? We'd like a coherent strategy to come forward.
It's so interesting you say that, because that's the feeling that I get as well. And a lot of the Westminster journalists who I speak to say that it feels like the party, they're exhausted and they're sort of running out of ideas, and they're feeling just very frayed and fragmented. Whereas I don't know if Labour do have ideas. I don't feel like they're a coherent force either. I feel like politics as a whole is very exhausted and sort of struggling to find its way.
But it's the whole thing, isn't it, that parties don't win elections, governments lose them.
Yeah, that's true. And a divided house cannot stand.
Yeah. Candice, can we look at this? Because this, I can't get my head around this. It's in The Sun and several other papers as well, about Prince Andrew back in the fold. It's pictures with William and Catherine.
I know, it's like people are trying to read the signs about the royal family. So the royal family all gathered in Balmoral this weekend, and Prince Andrew was photographed with them, which is meant to apparently, signify that perhaps he's being welcomed back in and he's not as disgraced as he was, because you saw the scenes from the coronation. I mean, I even felt a sliver of sympathy for him. He walked in and he just looked so embarrassed. He looked so alone, and it was clear he was very much on the outs.
I don't know why we have a picture of Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth on that. She wasn't there, regret to say, at church.
Yeah.
But
So what's going to happen with him now? I mean, is there any way back for him? I mean, I suppose he can't really have any public role right now, although the family may wish to bring him back in, I mean, for personal reasons.
I mean, can you imagine a public role? I mean, he'd be pelted with tomatoes.
Yes, he is. I mean, you know, that whole thing, I mean, it's still very shrouded in mystery. He's obviously just hidden from it and shrunk from it. But there's still many questions that need to be answered.
But it is on the front page of many of the papers this morning, isn't it? I mean, this has clearly captured the imagination of the British people. Claire, what do you make of it?
I think this is a man just travelling to church with his family. I don't think this is necessarily a rehabilitation. I think perhaps we're reading a little bit too much into this. He will never have another public role, and I think that's made abundantly clear. But to join his family at a church service, I'm not sure why we're getting so excited about that, because surely that is a matter for them. If they are going to church and they want him to come along and he wants to go along, why don't we just leave them to that decision? It's not as if they've asked him to go out there and speak on behalf of the royal family or to take up some kind of public engagement. I think that we always look at these things as something more than it actually is.
I think
that's a shame.
That may be, actually, Claire, a very good point.
Just going to church.
They must have known they'd be pictured, that's the thing.
Of course, but then if he hid round a corner and sort of went in under a big coat, then that would be photographed and then that would be talked about and that would be wrong. So I think whatever they do is going to draw attention to the family, draw attention to themselves, and we're all going to fill a vacuum.
Yeah, fair point. Claire, Candice, thank you very much indeed. We'll see you a little bit later on.
Thank you. Now let's get your weather forecast with Craig Snell.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to today, it's a drier and brighter day for most of us. Still a little bit of rain from time to time, but certainly feeling a bit warmer. So we start the day with some mist and fog around, also some fairly grey skies for parts of the Midlands and central southern England. But a lot of us seeing some sunny spells. However, the cloud will tend to bubble up as the day goes on. Also the risk of a few showers, especially across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, maybe even southeastern parts of England. But in the sunshine, feeling a little bit warmer, highs potentially reaching 21 or 22 degrees down towards the south. Into the evening, the showers beginning to fade away, so for a lot of England and Wales actually turning drier and clearer. Still going to see some showers for Northern Ireland and Scotland, especially along this band, which will just spread its way southeastwards as we go through the course of the night. Behind it, some blustery winds piling in behind, but for most, actually, temperatures staying in double figures as we start Tuesday morning. Could just fall down to around 5 to 6 degrees in some sheltered spots of England and Wales. So Tuesday morning, we start off with a mixture of cloud and some sunny spells. Still this line of showers, which will spread its way a little bit further into England and Wales as the day goes on. And then for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a mixture of sunny spells and blustery showers. Temperatures for most of us around where they should be for the time of year, but still feeling pleasantly warm in any sunshine across the southeastern corner.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now, do stay with us. We're going to have more on the Home Secretary's plan to see that police investigate every minor offence.
Yeah.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good morning, 7 o'clock on Monday the 28th of August. Today, the Home Secretary is calling for a crackdown on petty crime. She says the police must investigate every theft.
Nearly a third of councils in low-income areas are considering bankruptcy as a leading local government warns some local authorities have nothing left.
Donald Trump faces another court milestone today when the Fulton County District Attorney lays out her arguments relating to attempts to overthrow the 2020 election.
Half of foods in our diet can lead to strokes and heart attacks. That's according to a new study. Experts say the research into ultra-processed foods should be a wake-up call to the government.
It's a worrying one. Also coming up for you, we'll have the forecast with Craig.
Good morning. It's a bank holiday for most of us today. Will the weather spoil things? Find out in a little bit.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
You know, there's this huge search for the Loch Ness Monster over the weekend.
I didn't know that,
Did you
actually.
not?
I did not
You
know
clearly
that.
weren't watching Breakfast over the weekend.
Yeah,
That's a
sorry.
disgrace. No,
It's not early enough.
it was all happening at the Loch Ness Centre at Drumnadrochit on the banks of Loch Ness. Anyway, it's the biggest search for 50 years. It's been a major, major thing. They use hydrophones and all sorts of things to get to the depths. It's very big and very deep.
Is it very
Loch
deep?
Ness, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Anyway, Loch Ness monster hunters have detected 4 distinctive noises in the search,
Really?
which could be really important. Yeah, there was 200 people taking part, and it was the biggest hunt in half a century. So they heard what they call gloops.
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 Very technical word.
It's a very technical word, but it could be the sign of something very big down there.
Oh.
So it's all about the evidence, isn't it? It's all about the evidence. The problem is that when they were hearing these gloops, everyone apparently got very excited. This is in the Mirror this morning. The exploration group said, we got very excited, ran to make sure the recorder was on, but it wasn't plugged in.
Classic.
So they missed it.
Classic.
And then never heard him again. Because obviously Nessie was then swimming along somewhere, so they missed her.
That could have been the one opportunity to get Nessie on tape.
This was Alan McKenna. So they messed up there.
Oh, wow.
So they found Nessie, but forgot to record her.
It's like when you think you're taking a video or a photo and your camera's not switched on. Classic.
Yeah. So there you go.
Happens to the best of us.
So that's a little bit of a downer on the search for Nessie.
Do you actually think there could be a Loch Ness Monster?
Yes.
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh, please. No.
There's something down there.
No. That black and white image we just put up, if we can put that up again, that's just somebody with a paper mache
No, it's not. I mean,
little thing they've made at home and they just stuck it on the water. It's not real.
Oh, that could well be. And I mean, a few years ago, they did detect something the size of a transit van down there.
It's large.
And then they went back to check and it had gone.
Where had it gone then?
Well, it was because she moves, isn't it? So it wasn't actually a transit van that someone had dumped in the loch.
And how big is the loch?
It's about 22 miles long, something like that.
Oh, so it's like...
So it's long, and it's big and it is deep.
Well,
So-
look at that. Oh, so it's not a pond.
No, it's not a pond. No,
Well,
it's
I
massive.
was thinking it was a lake, like not a very big one. It's
No.
very big.
It's very.
Oh, so you can see why that might... Yeah, OK, right.
Right, so
I
she's in
understand
there
the context
somewhere.
a little bit more now.
Yeah, so she's in. So it's actually not that easy to search Loch Ness because it is so huge and so deep.
How have we put man on the moon and we don't yet know whether there's a monster in Loch Ness?
Yeah. Well, we know more about this.
Fascinating.
It's because we know more about the surface of the moon than we do about the bottoms of our own oceans.
It's a terrifying prospect, isn't
You see,
it, really?
because it's harder to get down there.
That scares me, all of the underwater stuff.
Does it?
Don't know what's down there, yeah.
Whatever you do,
It's
then
very
don't,
vast.
don't watch Swamp Thing on Prime
Doesn't
at the moment,
sound
because
like
that
my
will
cup of tea.
terrify. We finished that season last night. Very good.
Oh, can I tell you what I watched last
Oh,
night?
go on.
This is why I'm so tired this morning, because I couldn't sleep. I was too anxious. Watched
What
Hijack.
about working with me?
No, it was because of what I watched.
Oh, go on.
So I watched Hijacked, it might be, on Apple TV with Idris Elba. Everyone's talking about it at the moment, so I thought I'm going to watch that. Obviously, it's about an aeroplane being hijacked.
Oh, lovely.
Couldn't sleep, could I? Got myself in a right tiz-was.
Was it that scary?
Yeah, I felt it on my chest. I felt so anxious. I couldn't sleep.
Oh, that's not
I do
good.
recommend it, though. It's very, very good, but just don't watch it before bed.
Yeah, all right,
It's
yeah.
a bit scary.
Don't watch it if you've got work the next morning. So it's a Friday or Saturday night job for you.
Yeah, or maybe an afternoon and then make yourself a cup of tea, watch a few cartoons, lighten the mood and then try and go to bed.
Oh, well, there you go.
That's what I'd say to you.
You don't want to be anxious.
No, you don't.
No.
That's a
Let us know
horrible
what you've been
feeling.
watching. If anything any good, because we're always up for recommendations.
We are, yes. We recommend to each other quite often,
We
don't
do,
we?
we
So,
do. GBviews at gbnews.com.
we should start a book club, but like a
TV club.
a streaming TV club, yeah. We should tell each other what to watch.
Yeah, probably contractually we're probably obliged just to say you must only watch GB News. Did you see GB News yesterday afternoon? Wasn't it excellent?
I'll tell you something now. The taxi driver this morning that drove me in was listening to GB News Radio.
Oh.
Obviously a fan of the brand.
There you go,
Very
jolly
good.
good.
Jolly good.
Now, if you are feeling anxious, I'll tell you what makes you feel anxious is if you get burgled, things like that, because
Yeah.
that home invasion thing is just, it's awful. It's a really awful thing. Someone's been in your house and poking through your stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, the Home Secretary is now saying that crimes like that, what they call low-level crimes, must be investigated by the police. And she says the ignoring of low-level crime, which happens at the moment, is just unacceptable.
Well, Suella Braverman has secured agreement from all of the country's 43 police forces to pursue every offence where there is a reasonable line of inquiry.
Yeah, well, it follows concerns that theft, in whatever its forms, has essentially been decriminalised because cases aren't really being solved, and to be honest, they're not really being looked into.
Well, Holly Whitbread is a Conservative councillor in Essex and is with us this morning in the studio. Good morning to you, Holly. What do you make of this plan?
I think this is good news and I think it would be welcomed by members of the public. Actually, we've seen that the police actually tackle more crime than ever before, which is good news, and reach the highest level. But I think there is a concern that some of these low-level crimes, which aren't low-level if you experience them yourself, aren't being tackled in the way they should. So I think people will welcome this.
It's resources to do it, though. I mean, when Suella Braverman says every theft must be investigated, well, that's not really... With the best will in the world, that's not feasible, is it?
Well, we know the police are under a lot of pressure, but they are at the highest number of police officers ever. The police and crime commissioners across the country, it's their job to put pressure on the police force to try and deliver and try and actually hold some of these criminals to account.
You're a local councillor, Holly. You will understand the importance of trust in the police and how important it is the community feel as though when they do go to the police about something that matter is dealt with. Do you think that this could be a very positive thing in that sense, that going back to old school policing and actually fighting crime on the street?
Absolutely. I mean, if this is successful and we see more of these crimes tackled and addressed and punished, I think this will help build confidence in the police. And actually, you often hear people say there's not as many bobbies on the beat as there used to be. I know in my area, we really have an emphasis on community policing. So actually, Essex Police have introduced town teams, which are really popular, where you've got kind of two bobbies on the beat who focus on towns, tackling crime and antisocial behaviour, but it's that visibility, and people do like that reassurance.
Is that good value for money?
It is if they are tackling some of these low-level crimes, whether it be kind of pickpocketing or antisocial behaviour. But obviously it's about that kind of spread of resources and targeted as well. I know in my own area, we've got kind of hired police officers in our council, and they really focus on what the local priorities are, whether it be antisocial behaviour on a state, but actually also bigger crimes such as county lines.
You see, what I like about... We don't have any more, but we used to have a community officer, and he'd pop round for a cup of tea and all that sort of thing. And you can understand why people say, well, what are they actually doing that's fighting crime? But in a sense, if they're just there, if they're a visible presence, they can prevent crime, can't they?
Absolutely. I think it's good to have people there on the ground because it does act as a deterrent. But actually, I know in my own community, there's concerns recently around kind of shoplifting, particularly in places like Boots, where people have just been coming in and stealing kind of low-value things. But actually, if you've got a police officer on the ground who the shopkeepers know, that's a really positive thing and helps tackle crime.
Yeah. You also think in looking at the criminality side of things, if you stop people in low-level crime situations, hopefully that would then stop them going on to do more serious offences later on in life.
Absolutely. It's often kind of a gateway to doing more. And I think Suella's also talked about more kind of action against low-level drugs. And actually, it can be the thing that kind of sparks off more criminality later in life. So I think it goes to the root of things, really tackling things at a low level to look at the bigger picture.
Can I ask you about S114 notices, which sound extremely dull, but it's important, actually, because it's being claimed that 30% of councils in some of the poorest parts of the country are thinking about these S114s, which effectively means they can't balance the books. Councils will be declaring bankruptcy.
Yeah, this is a real problem across the board, particularly for kind of those upper-tier authorities which have social care in their responsibility. Post-pandemic, there have been more and more pressures, particularly kind of complex needs around children's social care, but also we live in an ageing population, and as a result of the pandemic, people perhaps with learning disabilities have more need for social care. So this is a real concern. As a county council, you see these pressures on a day-to-day basis, and actually it means that you can't do some of the nice-to-haves. So this is a real concern across the board.
But in terms of going... I mean, the idea of a council going bankrupt is very scary because of what they provide. However, presumably they wouldn't actually be allowed to... The government couldn't allow these councils to stop providing basic things, could they?
No, so in these circumstances, they still be providing statutory responsibilities. So social care, they continue to provide, and actually things like bin collections, you can not provide those services. But what we have seen is increasing pressure, which actually means that you see cuts in things like youth services or some of the things that you don't have to do. And ultimately, as a council, it is about sound financial responsibility and management, which is really important. But there are these increased pressures, and what we have seen is a lot of councils take risks to bring in other forms of revenue, but actually in the current economy we're in, investment in property isn't having the same generation.
No, it isn't. Holly, really good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. You. I guess the problem is if you're a council in a poorer area, which this is to be, then your there's going to be your council tax intake is going to be lower, but actually your requirements may be higher. Your financial spend may be higher. But that needs to be looked at.
Council tax is so expensive, isn't it? I mean, so many people will be listening to that story and thinking, I pay so much more now in my council tax, which would suggest then it's the funding model. It's broken.
Possibly, but then...
Or maybe it's social care costing too much.
We've all got to start paying even more. I don't know. Anyway, let's know what you think. Now, believe it or not, today marks 2 years since Britain's withdrawal from Afghanistan, following NATO's 20 years there.
Well, dozens of nations evacuated their forces from the country after the Taliban retook the capital, Kabul.
Let's talk to Major General Chip Chapman, ex-head of counter-terrorism at the MOD. Really good to see you this morning, Chip. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that 2 years on, we're not hearing a lot about what's going on in Afghanistan at the minute.
Yeah, and I think that's for the real reason that the strategic objective of being in Afghanistan was to prevent strategic threats and attacks on either the US UK homeland. And we achieved that many, many years ago. There is a lot going on in Afghanistan. Certainly, one of the parts of the Doha agreement, one of the reasons we withdrew is that we needed CT assurances, counterterrorism assurances from the Taliban that Afghanistan would not be used as a safe haven in the future. Now, Al-Qaeda is a busted flush at the moment. ISK, Islamic State Khorasan, which covers both Afghanistan and Pakistan, is still a threat, but it is not a threat to the UK or US. It is a regional threat, and there have been 400 attacks since we withdrew in August 21. And indeed, you might recall at the end of July, there was a horrific attack by ISK in the tribal homelands in Pakistan, just over the border, which killed 50 people and wounded 200 people. So they're still very active, but the Taliban are going after the IS networks because they are the threat to the Taliban, who see the Taliban as apostates. That is, that they don't see them as true believers and true Muslims.
What are your reflections 2 years on from the British withdrawal of Afghanistan? We've just been seeing videos there of desperate Afghanis actually scaling the walls of Kabul airport there. And we remember those scenes 2 years ago in August 2021. What are your reflections 2 years on?
Well, it was a well-executed operation, but it was only a partial mission success because we left people in Afghanistan that we owed some sort of allegiance to in terms of they had helped us during the campaign. And that is why we still see two things, really. We see the push factor of people wishing to leave Afghanistan because it is a horrific regime, which we won't deal with. And of course, because there is now a Afghanistan diaspora in the UK, we took 15,000 people under Operation Pitting, the withdrawal into the UK. That is also a pull factor of some of the Afghan people who are fleeing, mainly via a route via Pakistan, to come to the UK. So we left as a mess, the international regime, a horrific mess in Afghanistan. But people often forget that the strategic objective was not to do nation building in Afghanistan, it was to prevent these catastrophic attacks. And you didn't need a permanent presence to do that. And we saw that in a way with the taking out of Zawahiri, the Al-Qaeda leader, in July 2022. So over-the-horizon capability is probably sufficient to deal with any residual terrorism which may emanate from Afghanistan in the wider international sphere.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it's a valid point to say we weren't there to do nation building, but you know, definitely didn't want the Taliban to be heading back. I mean, and you've got to have an exit plan, haven't you? And the problem seemed to be that our exit plan was hugely expedited because of the United States. I mean, it wasn't our idea, was it?
No, that's right. And what it really showed, in a way, was the fact that both UK and European power is subordinate to the international hegemon. You know, if there is only one superpower, you know, when America says jump, everyone else jumps alongside with it. Now, if the UK still thought it was a vital interest to be there, it should have built some sort of coalition to have tried to enable that to happen. That didn't happen. Now, one also could argue that the Doha Agreement had said that all international troops would leave, and therefore we were doing part of that. But we had from February 2020, when the agreement was signed, to originally April 2021, and we actually withdrew in August 2021. So it was a 4-month extension. So those who'd worked for us, we could have, under the ARAP scheme, that was the Afghan Relocation and Assistance Program, which was running from 2017, had taken a view to get those up before any of this occurred.
Chip, what's your reflections on the loss of life in Afghanistan? UK Armed Forces personnel, 457 people lost their lives fighting in Afghanistan. We just got this email in from Barry, who says, listened to an interview this morning. As an Afghan veteran, I wholly endorse what was said. After 20 years, billions of pounds and many lives sacrificed, we achieved nothing. We must never allow our politicians to sleepwalk us into war again. What's your reaction to that? Do you feel as though we achieved nothing in those 20 years?
Well, it's always a bitter pill to swallow for all the families of those who are killed if you don't achieve any strategic objective. The thing I would say is that both post-Iraq and post-Afghanistan, we now have a series of what they called from the report into Iraq, the Chilcot checklist. And that is that you should, go through a series of steps before you even start to campaign. Because, to have strategic defeat, and let's be clear, this was a strategic defeat in that we left the battlefield in part or total possession to the Taliban. You then need to understand the consequences if you have that strategic defeat. One of them, of course, is that you've got an unstable Afghanistan, which lots of people wish to flee, and there are consequences to that. There are long-term consequences for those who are wounded both psychologically and physically. So it is far harder on a personal and family level to cope with things if you've had a strategic victory, something like the Falklands, than it is on a strategic defeat, because Afghanistan was nothing other than a strategic defeat.
OK. Chip Chapman, as always, it's really good to see you. Thanks very much indeed.
Very, very difficult, isn't it? Especially if you're a veteran or you're a family member of a veteran who fought in Afghanistan. It must be so difficult, especially when these sorts of anniversaries come up. And you see the state of the country now, especially when it comes to women and girls. Very difficult.
It is very difficult. It is. But, things were changed at the time, even if not now. And so I think it's important that I don't think people died in vain. I think they made a difference.
No, you can't believe that, can you? No, you absolutely can't.
Anyway, it's 7:20. Let's bring you up to date with some of the other stories today. And the Home Office is considering fitting migrants who enter the UK illegally with electronic tags. Officials are reportedly evaluating it as a way to prevent migrants who are unable to be housed in detention sites from absconding.
High street chain Wilko could be saved from collapse after a last-minute rescue bid was launched. Private equity firm M2 Capital has submitted a last-minute bid worth £90 million and has said it plans to guarantee all employees' jobs for 2 years.
Fingers crossed. And two major studies have shown that ultra-processed food significantly raises the risk of heart disease, heart attacks and strokes. Experts saying it needs to be a wake-up call for governments. The popularity of ready meals has soared in recent years, and ultra-processed foods apparently making up for more than half of the average diet in the UK.
My friend Beck has just texted me.
Oh, yes.
Saying,
morning, Becca.
Morning. Saying she agrees with you. There is a Loch Ness monster, and they're going to have to find it.
Yeah, they are going to have to find it.
Yeah.
It's a very good point. Mind you, maybe we're focusing on the wrong thing. Philip's been in touch. Morning, Philip. He says, forget about the Loch Ness monster. What you really need to be searching for are the wild haggis.
The wild haggis?
It's true. They can be a danger.
Where are they?
Well, the wild haggis. You've got to shoot the haggis.
Are they not? They're not in the lake. They're in the forest.
No, they're in the surrounding.
What not?
The wild haggis, yeah.
Yeah, oh no, it's all very dangerous, isn't it?
If you like haggis, then you've got to find one first.
John makes a very good point. He says, how come we can find the Titanic at 18,000 feet in the endless ocean, but we can't find the Loch Ness monster in an 800-foot lake? It's a fantastic point.
It is a point, but...
And I made a similar one about the moon.
But we know... Well, we know where the moon is. We know where the...
Do know where the moon is.
We do. And we know where the Titanic went down. I mean, I know there's some drift, but we know where the Titanic went down, so it wasn't that big an area to search, would be my observation.
You just think you could do sonar?
Well, that's what the sort of hydrophones are for, isn't it? It's all that sort of thing.
And then is that what they're finding Nessie in? Hopefully the sonar.
Yes.
Picking up all these sounds, but they didn't turn the recording on.
No, they've got to plug it in.
It happens to the best of us.
They forgot to plug it in. Do you know, when you're talking about the moon, we picture the moon, you picture the Earth and the moon sort of just here, not very far away. Did you know you could fit... The moon is so far away, every single planet within the solar system, back to back, would fit between us and the moon. It's miles away.
You know everything about space.
No, I don't.
You do.
I don't.
He's very knowledgeable.
But that's it. The moon is... If you look at it, if you looked at it from space, the moon looks like miles away from Earth.
Well, it is. If you can fit all the planets in a line, it is a long way away from Earth.
There you go.
Well, there you go.
There's an interesting yet useless fact for you this morning.
You'd be very good at a pub quiz, especially if there's a space round.
Last time we did a pub quiz, I did win.
Well, you would. In
nice.
this job, don't you think your general knowledge is really quite good?
Yeah, well, I mean, it should
just remember
be,
things.
frankly. frankly. Anyway, look, enough of me waffling on. Let's get a bit of a waffle on your weather from Craig.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to today, it's a drier and brighter day for most of us. Still a little bit of rain from time to time, but certainly feeling a bit warmer. So we start the day with some mist and fog around, also some fairly grey skies for parts of the Midlands and central southern England, but a lot of us seeing some sunny spells. However, the cloud will tend to bubble up as the day goes on. Also the risk of a few showers, especially across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, maybe even southeastern parts of England. But in the sunshine, feeling a little bit warmer, the highs potentially reaching 21 or 22 degrees down towards the south. Into the evening, the showers beginning to fade away, so for a lot of England and Wales actually turning drier and clearer. Still going to see some showers for Northern Ireland and Scotland, especially along this band, which will just spread its way southeastwards as we go through the course of the night. Behind it, some blustery winds piling in behind, but for most, actually, temperatures staying in double figures as we start Tuesday morning. Could just fall down to around 5 to 6 degrees in some sheltered spots of England and Wales. So Tuesday morning, we start off with a mixture of cloud and some sunny spells. Still this line of showers, which will spread its way a little bit further into England and Wales as the day goes on. And then for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a mixture of sunny spells and blustery showers. Temperatures for most of us around where they should be for the time of year, but still feeling pleasantly warm in any sunshine across the southeastern corner.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
So here you go. If the Earth was the size of a football,
yes,
the moon would be 30 feet away.
That's a long way.
Which is quite a lot.
It's a very long way.
And on that same scale, the sun would be a 40-foot sphere, 1.7 miles away.
Wow.
And that's if the Earth was the size of a football.
So the sun is huge and really far away.
Quite hot too.
And very hot. Yes. Well, every day is a school day.
And what colour's the sun?
Orange.
No!
Oh, what colour is it?
Brilliant white.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Is it?
It only looks orange because of the way it refracts through. If you go into space, the sun is just white.
How do you know this stuff?
Because I'm dull.
Because you're very clever.
I'm a geek.
He's very clever.
Very
niche, very niche, very niche.
Anyway, as the government's climate change advisors, talking of the sun, ask us all to turn off our heating because that way we will reach net zero. Well, if you shut off all the power supply, then we would reach net zero, wouldn't we? Do we need to compromise our lives to fight global warming? We'll discuss it next.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Well, here's one story that, well, will it divide opinion? Well, it divide opinion amongst some people. I don't know if it'll divide opinion amongst you, to be honest, or us. Britons have been urged not to turn on the heating in the evenings to help us reach net zero.
Well, the report by the government's Climate Change Committee suggests that households should instead preheat their home in the afternoon when electricity usage across the country is lower.
So, we're asking, is it right that households are compromising or being told to compromise to help the government reach its green agenda?
Yes, well, let's get the thoughts of the director of Net Zero Watch, Andrew Montford, who says it's wrong that households are having to compromise to reach net zero targets. And let's also welcome the former CEO of Energy UK, Angela Knight, who disagrees with him. Well, good morning to you both. Angela, let's start with you, shall we? So do you really think people should have to turn off their heating in the winter to help the government?
No, is the answer. People shouldn't have to do that to help the government. I think the question is actually much broader than that. And we've never really got to any sort of state in this country yet in which the plan for how we reduce carbon, how we get to net zero, is actually going to take place, how much it's going to cost, and who's going to pay for it. So right now, we still sort of sit around in a situation where there's a broad support for net zero, as long as it doesn't actually impact our lives and it doesn't cost us any money. Now, those three things are completely and utterly incompatible. And until there is, as I say, a willingness from all political parties to address those points, we will just limp from one stage to another stage. We'll have, one big objection to wind farms over there, another big objection to putting in nuclear power there, another big objection to increase in our bills. So I think it is, as it has been for so long, just a whole question of the high-level policy and vision thing, but no reality of how to get there at all.
All right, Angela, so but do you think, though, we should in some way be prepared to compromise?
Well, I think that we inevitably are going to... We're inevitably going to have to compromise. Either we compromise, and it's going to be a compromise in one way or another, colder houses, pay more money, increase taxes, accept big infrastructure on a doorstep, or all of that lot. Either we're going to compromise in there, or you can't meet your climate change targets. It's absolutely straightforward. I do think that in the end, people will accept some form of a compromise, yes. What that compromise is can only be clear if there's proper discussions out there and if there's a getting away from just making statements without filling in the detail underneath. Policy details are always difficult because they always are challenging. There's no such thing as an unchallenging policy. And that's one of the reasons why people move away from it, policymakers move away from it. And in this particular instance, many, many statements have been made by all political parties and indeed by the Climate Change Committee itself without really getting into the detail of what it means and what it's going to cost individuals and what indeed it's going to cost the country.
Yeah, but people don't... I mean, and Andrew, we'll get to you in just a sec, I promise. I just want to say, Angela, and I'm not having a go, but, you know, so asking people to compromise is very hard, isn't it? And
yes.
We can't help but notice you're in the... We can't help but notice you're in the Alps and you probably haven't walked there.
No, you're dead right. I haven't walked there. Also, it's absolutely pouring with rain, by the way. It's much better weather in the UK than it is here. Often the Alps is really nice in summer, but I can't even see an Alp, by the way, out of the window. And there again, you have a big point. How did I get here? Mixture of plane and car. We discuss at length the use of electric vehicles. I suspect, actually, that electric vehicles can only be an interim to something else, maybe hydrogen, because with electric vehicles, the actual overall cost of building an electric vehicle is pretty heavy on a whole number of environmental issues, as does when you have to dispose of things like the batteries. So, yes, compromise is inevitably going to be there, or we have to change the targets. It's one or the other. Right now, if the population wishes to stick with the targets, they've got to accept the compromises. And I think policymakers have to say what those compromises are. The Climate Committee has actually a positive part to play in setting out those compromises. We can either say, what a load of rubbish they're talking today about having to heat your houses in the afternoon, turn down the temperatures or whatever, or we say, OK, that is one of the compromises. Are we prepared to accept that or not? And as I say, you can't get to a net zero target without accepting compromises. So let's talk about those, or let's ditch or shift the targets. I think it's one or the other.
OK, Andrew, let's put that over to you, shall we? Do we have to compromise or do we have to change the target?
Yeah, I think Angela made quite an interesting point that we actually need to step back a bit from the nitty gritty. I'm just not sure that she stepped back far enough, because there is a broader question than, if you like, the engineering questions around the net zero target. There is the question of whether the targets themselves are sensible. And the answer to that is that they're clearly not. It is clearly costing us much more to address global warming than the harm that global warming is supposed to cause us. I've seen one paper which analysed the cost of decarbonising the electricity system so far, and it's about twice as expensive as the damage that global warming is alleged to cause. So the policies are clearly irrational. So the answer to your question is, yeah, we need to look at the targets and just say, is this sane? And clearly they're not. I think people don't realize how much compromise is going to be required. These things of preheating your house so that the grid doesn't have to use so much power during the evening peak is a small element of it. But the thing people have to understand is that is only going to address the problem in a minor way. The big problem is we're putting in all these renewables, but we don't have any way to balance the grid when the wind isn't blowing. There is no technology that is even close to being ready to deal with that. I mean, Angela mentioned hydrogen. Hydrogen is incredibly inefficient. You put in, a megawatt hour of electricity into your hydrogen system, if you like. You make hydrogen from it, and you get very little electricity back out of it once it's come out of the store. It's a hugely inefficient process, which means hugely expensive electricity. People just aren't going to be able to afford to heat their homes, when the wind isn't blowing, because you're not going to be asked whether you want to turn off your power. You're going to be, first of all, they're going to offer to pay you to turn off your power. But if not enough people take up the offer, then they are just going to switch you off. All your smart meters are connected, if you like, to central authority, which can say, okay, the choice is major blackouts, or we will just switch off people's fridges, switch off their EV chargers, switch off their central heating, and you just won't be asked at all. That's the world we're heading to, because policy has been driven by, if you like, virtue signaling. Politicians are quite clear about this. They say we're doing this to lead the way, because it's quite common knowledge now, if you like, that the UK emits very little of the world's carbon. We're 1% of carbon emissions. So if we completely decarbonize, it makes virtually no difference at all. And politicians say we should show other people the way. So this is a virtue signaling exercise for politicians, and all this pain that you are feeling now, and it's costing people a lot of money now, and all the pain that they're going to feel in the future, this is really just to make politicians feel good about themselves. It's a very sad state of affairs.
Well, Angela, let's put that to you. Is this just virtue signalling?
Oh, I think a lot of it is. I think that's where it all started. And I think sort of emotion, dare I say it, because I don't think anybody really thought through what are the costs and the consequences of high-level decisions and pronouncements that were being made. Let me just, I think we're all actually in very similar positions over this. Let me just pick up the hydrogen question, if I may. I entirely agree with the hydrogen question. I was talking about hydrogen in cars, not hydrogen for generating electricity for the grid. And I'm one of those, actually, who believes that small-scale nuclear reactors is absolutely the way this country should go, regardless. It gives us an energy security that is very important for us. And I think will get even more important, because as the world takes a different view to globalization, and it takes a different view generally, especially in Europe, as to how it generates electricity and how it generates and what it does about gas, unless we have a greater degree of self-sufficiency than we have on something that is absolutely reliable, which wind, of course, is not, then we will have the problems that have just been outlined of finding ourselves without power at certain times of the day, and there's absolutely nothing we can do about it. I have a son. One of my sons lives in Spain, albeit he lives in a part of a reasonably rural, not terribly rural, but reasonably rural part of Spain, and that is exactly what they have. They run out of electricity in Spain from time to time, and he will be perfectly, normal day, and suddenly find that they have no power whatsoever. And so he's looking at a greater degree of self-sufficiency for that particular reason. And our natural resources and self-sufficiency is generally a very important attention that now governments of all political persuasions need to pay attention to, along with reasonableness. And that is exactly where I think we all agree. What is it that we can reasonably expect to do? Should we reasonably look at making sure that we operate in a sustainable and use renewable way? And I think the answer to that is yes, but the emphasis is on reasonable. Reasonable costs, reasonable timescale, reasonable expectations, reasonable views of who pays what. And it sounds so boring to say, let's be reasonable. So it sounds much better to say, oh, let's do X or let's do Y.
Yeah, well, look,
is where we should all be.
We've got to leave it there, but good to talk to you both. Andrew and Angela, thanks very much indeed.
Now, is your diet putting you at risk of a heart attack? That's what a new study is suggesting. We'll discuss that when we go through the papers with Claire Pearsall and Candice Holdsworth. That's next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant, the victory, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. It's a very exciting time because Stephen's getting a puppy tomorrow, so we're very distracted by puppy pictures, aren't we?
Yes, we are, yes.
Very exciting.
Rex.
Yeah,
boy.
we're just talking about when I can I can come up and visit. And I did think tomorrow, but the puppy's coming tomorrow, so I think that would be a bit much, really.
Yeah,
I'll let you settle in.
And basically, because me and my husband are off this week, which is a perfect time to visit, and you're not working until Friday. She says, I'm full of... I've got all these beauty appointments.
Got too many beauty appointments. Can't fit it into the schedule. But I will. I'll look at the diary and I'll get back to you on that one. But I do want to let you settle in as well. It's a very exciting time in the Dixon household.
Yeah.
Rex Dixon.
Yes, there we go.
He's arriving tomorrow.
Anyway, shall we talk to Claire Pearsall and Candice Holmes, who are going to take us through the papers?
And they're also very excited, aren't you?
Yeah, they're very excited. Let's talk about diets, should we?
We should. And this is front page of The Mirror. It's regarding Knowsley, which apparently is a desert when it comes to the availability of fresh fruit and vegetables.
Right.
And I think it does... It's quite a stark issue, this, because nowhere should be without access to fresh fruit and vegetables, given the obesity crisis within this country, the health needs of communities. And I think that there is a really big part for governments to play, but there's also a part for local councils. And I've said this so many times about the ability to cook something from scratch. Because I don't know about anybody else, but I'm not the best at cooking in the first place.
No.
So, shockingly, I'm not that great.
Who does the cooking in your house?
Well, it is me. And I do have to learn how to use different ingredients and everything. And I have done that. But I look back to my mum, who used to create all of these really wonderful meals out of pretty much nothing. And always had a recipe and the ability to do so. And
you need your
think
B-row
we're
book
missing
and
out.
all that sort of thing. Mum always had a B-row book, still got the B-row book.
Yes.
Full of recipes.
Yeah, and I've inherited my mum's recipe.
Oh, that's nice.
Which is absolutely lovely. And some of her handwritten notes, which is beautiful.
Are you a decent cook, Candice?
Oh, yeah, I love cooking.
Oh,
Do you?
good.
Yes,
Good.
very much so.
What do you make?
And I'm
What do you like
very
to
into
make?
healthy cooking as well. But I think that's because when I was learning to cook, my parents were going through some massive health phase. So we ate so much healthy food when I was a child. And apparently, from what I know from doctors who know a lot about this stuff, they say that the foods that you eat as a child and a teenager often shape your preferences later on.
Yeah.
It's set very early in life. So I feel like it was good. I had that sort of food education at an early age. But it is so interesting with this story, though. I mean, why is obesity and poor nutrition associated with poverty? I mean, obviously, for almost the whole of human history, poor nutrition was not access to food. I mean, you were very underweight. But now it's the opposite problem, and I want to know what's going on there. Is there a problem with food culture, food education?
But is it
passed down generationally?
Because, I mean, you just made a point there about education. You've learned through your parents.
Yes, yeah.
And that's why you know how to eat healthily. So is that the issue here?
I think some of it is, but I also think it's the availability of access to shops. A lot of people in this area are not close to supermarkets. The public transport system isn't great. If you're buying a lot of fruit and vegetables, that's very heavy. If you've got to carry that back, you've got to get on 3 buses, you've got to walk. It is easier to get convenience food locally, microwave meals.
I think, do you know what, though? I think we're lazy.
Do you
I hate to say it, I think we're lazy because of all the stuff and you see them everywhere now, these Deliveroo and all these sort of things.
Uber Eats.
With people, and every time you go into if you pop in, because I do occasionally have a McDonald's or whatever, and there's a queue of people collected. You can't even be bothered to go to a McDonald's to buy it now. You have to have it delivered. And all I mean, that worries. I've never done it.
Yeah.
It worries me that so many people are doing that.
And I think it is convenience has become one of those things. We've all got very used to having everything delivered to us, everything immediately. And when you have to stock up and try and plan meals for a week, it's very difficult. And I do think the cost of living crisis probably comes into this. You're going to go and get cheaper foods which have a longer shelf life if you're on a lower income. And fruit and vegetable naturally will have a shorter shelf life. It is more expensive. So I think there's a lot that needs to be done. But I do think education, you can freeze some stuff, you can cut things up if you have access to a freezer. But again, if you've got people living in accommodation which doesn't lend itself to having a big freezer, you can't always have that. So I think that there is a lot that needs to be done with this, because it shouldn't be the case these days that people are going without fresh fruit and vegetables at all.
Yeah.
No,
It's so expensive, though, isn't it? Like a punnet of strawberries these days, it's like £3.50 or something.
Well, it is, but if you buy your basic veg, your potatoes and tomatoes, you can get it really cheap.
Yeah.
If I go and do that sort of shopping, I don't have to spend any money at all.
But it's amazing. I mean, you can spend about £20 getting loads of stuff, lots of stuff. I think people just need to be aware of these sorts of things, like especially putting stuff together, being versatile, the things that you can pair with other things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just stuff like that. But then you have to be used to cooking, and you have to be used to recipes, and you have to understand what's out there and what you can do. And
comes back to education, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Let's have a look at this story about wild camping, shall we? Should we mix it up, Candice, in the Mail? No showers, no loos and no drinking water. How wild camping touched my soul.
See, I love this because that is the food critic, Tanya Gold, who always writes such amazing articles. And she was writing in the Mail this weekend about how she went camping on Dartmoor. And she saw the most beautiful ancient woodlands like Wisman's Wood. But one point she made, and it's actually very interesting because we're talking about food culture, is she was saying, you know, she felt very in touch with herself, with her body, with her health, with her well-being. And she said, you know, why have we lost touch with this?
But she doesn't want to do it again.
No,
What's wrong with a woman?
I know. She was saying the problem is that they took canned foods to eat and, like, cook on the saucepan, and she absolutely hates that, being a food critic. She was just like, this is disgusting. But a lot of people just make do when they go camping, and they don't worry about it too much. But I just feel like that's what a lot of people are doing now. You know, when I speak to people about the sort of holidays they're having and the things they're doing, it often is going on a forest break or going out into nature. And I think that's so important about being healthy, and good well-being is about that, right? Like, not sitting at home ordering McDonald's on Deliveroo. It's getting out there, walking, you know, feeling like grounded within yourself, not constantly immersed in technology.
And we benefit from... I mean, I know lockdown was a nightmare for an awful lot of people, but there was something about getting out and about, walking in the country and all that sort of thing with our enforced 1-hour walks and all that sort of thing. But I felt more connected to nature during lockdown.
And I think people did, you're right. Not everybody had the opportunity to do so, but we took our statutory hours walk out. But the weather was also good, and I think that makes a huge difference. And if we just look at the summer weather that we've had recently, it's not been the greatest. It doesn't encourage you to go out there and camp and get in the cold and wet.
No, we need to brave it, though, for the good of our souls, for the good of our
well-being.
souls, yes. Claire, Candy, sorry it's been a bit of a short one, but we'll see you in the next hour. Look forward to it.
Got talking about food, that's what we do. Can't stop us. We're talking about the weather there with Claire. Let's get the weather now with Craig's now.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to today, it's a dry and brighter day for most of us. Still a little bit of rain from time to time, but certainly feeling a bit warmer. So we start the day with some mist and fog around, also some fairly grey skies for parts of the Midlands and central southern England, but a lot of us seeing some sunny spells. However, the cloud will tend to bubble up as the day goes on. Also the risk of a few showers, especially across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, maybe even southeastern parts of England. But in the sunshine, feeling a little bit warmer, the highs potentially reaching 21 or 22 degrees down towards the south. Into the evening, the showers beginning to fade away, so for a lot of England and Wales actually turning drier and clearer. Still going to see some showers for Northern Ireland and Scotland, especially along this band, which will just spread its way southeastwards as we go through the course of the night. Behind it, some blustery winds piling in behind, but for most, actually, temperatures staying in double figures as we start Tuesday morning. Could just fall down to around 5 to 6 degrees in some sheltered spots of England and Wales. So Tuesday morning, we start off with a mixture of cloud and some sunny spells. Still this line of showers, which will spread its way a little bit further into England and Wales as the day goes on. And then for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a mixture of sunny spells and blustery showers. Temperatures for most of us around where they should be for the time of year, but still feeling pleasantly warm in any sunshine across the southeastern corner.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock on Monday, the 28th of August. Today, the Home Secretary calls for a crackdown on petty crime. She says the police must investigate every theft.
Nearly a third of councils in low-income areas are considering bankruptcy, as a leading local government warns some local authorities have nothing left.
Donald Trump faces another court milestone today when the Fulton County District Attorney lays out her arguments relating to attempts to overthrow the 2020 election.
Half of foods in our diet can lead to strokes and heart attacks. That's according to a new study. Experts say the research into ultra-processed foods should be a wake-up call to the government. Perhaps ourselves.
And coming up, we'll have your latest forecast with Craig.
Good morning. It's a bank holiday for most of us today. Will the weather spoil things? Find out in a little bit.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Oh, plenty of people get in touch about the broke councils issue. Lynn says the problem is councils are run by people with little or no business acumen. They have no concept of balancing accounts. Many are young people with no idea what the community needs and how to get the best value for money.
Yeah,
which is it is a valid point, isn't it? Got to be run like businesses, but you think they'd be... I don't really know how they work. I've never been on a council.
You think they get enough money as well? I mean, council tax is absolutely extortionate. So you think there's something wrong with the system. You've got them going on Nessie as well, Loch Ness Monster. There's a hunt going on, a new one.
Well, it's just finished.
Oh, it's just finished, actually.
Missed the boat.
Missed the boat.
Literally.
Quite literally. Rachel agrees with me, which is great, who says that we now have cameras on phones and everything. If Nessie existed, we'd have loads of pictures and videos on the internet by now, and I agree with you, Rachel.
No, she's there.
Doesn't exist.
She's there somewhere. It's very, very deep.
If it did, we'd know about it.
And on the whole climate change issue, we were talking earlier on about whether we need to do more, we need to sacrifice more to reach net zero and all the rest of it. And actually, our two guests sort of saying, well, not necessarily. It's just maybe we need to change the targets. Mark disagrees. and says all these changes it's not about helping the government, it's about saving our own lives and our children's lives. Climate change will cause crop failures, mass migration and misery for us all. We have to cut back and we cannot carry on with business as usual.
OK.
So keep all your thoughts coming through. GBviews at gbnews.com.
Yeah, and just on the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, promising that every theft is going to be investigated. Steve is a former police officer. He says his career has spanned 5 decades, and he says he's seen a steady decline, one after another, of reports of crimes being investigated and this broken window attitude. So he says this is a lovely sentiment from our Home Secretary.
Yeah, well, she is telling police that they must investigate every theft. She says the ignoring of low-level crime is quite simply unacceptable.
Well, Suella Braverman has secured agreement from all of the country's 43 police forces to pursue every offence where there is a reasonable line of inquiry.
Well, it follows concerns that theft has essentially been decriminalised because of the extremely low rate of cases being solved or even investigated.
Well, GB News' Deputy Political Editor Tom Harwood joins us now in the studio. Good morning to you, Tom. What do you make of this?
Well, it is extraordinary, isn't it? Perhaps people would have thought that the police's job was to investigate any crime where there was a reasonable lead. But it is now the case that the College of Policing will be issuing this clear instruction. And they're expected now to follow leads from CCTV or geolocation on some items that have been stolen. Of course, the Home Secretary has written this morning in The Telegraph that too often people feel like the police just give them a crime reference number, close a case down, don't want to investigate things that are seen as perhaps more trivial crime, whether it's shoplifting or the theft of a bike. But the Home Secretary is writing there is no such thing as trivial crime. All crime is crime. Perhaps the political difficulty here, however, is that the Conservative Party in one form or other, yes, for a large chunk of it in minority or as a coalition with the Lib Dems, but in one form or other have been in government since 2010. And the sense that the police aren't investigating every crime, highlighting this issue and trying to sort of row back on where we've got to, might not be the sort of silver bullet politically that it might first appear to be.
Well, with the admission that it's all fallen down on their watch, sort of thing. But you've got to be honest. At least it's honesty saying it's not as good as it should be.
It is honest, but it also highlights what I think is a growing feeling that the police aren't really doing their job. Increasingly, we're seeing all of these stories of sort of how, as you said in your introduction, crime has in some cases seemed to be decriminalised, how phones or bicycles or laptops that go missing, perhaps even ones that can be geolocated to a specific location and the police simply won't turn up. This will be a new impetus upon the police to go and do that, although there are critics who say that per person, police numbers are lower, of course, that there aren't as many PCSOs, community support officers, that the logistics of doing this might be harder. And some voices from the police this morning have been suggesting that the police at the moment try and focus their resources on where there is harm to humans, on cases of domestic abuse, on cases where there could be real harm to people, and perhaps they prioritise their resources on those rather than missing objects. There is some worry from some quarters that putting more emphasis on missing objects means less emphasis on some other crime.
And you can see the defence already, can't you, Tom? Because there's been buy-in from all 43 police forces, but there is that word reasonable. And that word reasonable, it is open to interpretation, isn't it?
It certainly is. And this is what I think we will see the police highlighting in a number of areas. Of course, there will be some areas where the police have more capacity. There, of course, have been 20,000 more police officers hired compared to 2019, although some of those are still going through their training, and of course, the PCSO numbers are still quite a lot lower as well. So there will, of course, be discretion brought in. There's always operational independence in terms of how the police operate, and it's never quite directly politically controlled.
Yeah. OK. Tom, for now, thanks very much indeed. I've never quite convinced, and apologies if you are a PCSO, I'm never quite convinced by them. Is
that not the chap who was saying came around for a cup of tea and he really liked it?
No. He was a bobby. He was a constable, but he was a community officer. whereas the PCSOs are not actually police officers, are they? They're just police support officers. So I sort of wonder, what quite can they do? Do they have powers of arrest? No.
No, says Tom.
There's a wonderful Mitchell and Webb sketch.
Oh.
Of a police officer and a PCSO walking down the street, and the police officer just turns to the PCSO and goes, "I hate you." Yeah. It's a very funny sketch.
Yes.
But then, isn't it the visibility? You know, like we were talking about earlier. I mean, is it just good for the public and people to see a presence on the street? Is that enough to feel safer?
I think it makes a difference.
I think it does.
I think it makes a difference. Anyway, if you've got any thoughts on that, let us know. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Now, Sadiq Khan, London Mayor, has denied he plans to charge motorists for every journey in a pay-per-mile road tax, claiming it's not on his agenda. That's despite being part of his transport strategy published in 2018.
Well, of course, these things come to the fore because it's all ahead of the ULEZ, the ultra-low emission zone expansion, which starts tomorrow, which is going to make the capital the world's largest pollution charging area.
Well, Neil Garrett, Conservative member for the London Assembly for Croydon and Sutton, joins us this morning. Very good to see you this morning, Neil.
Morning.
So what do you make of this plan?
Well, I think it would fundamentally change the way that roads work in London. I mean, this is not just a central London thing. You know, in some other cities, there are all sorts of schemes just in central London. This is the whole of London, all the way out to the outskirts, including, you know, in the Green Belt, in loads of suburban areas that we have in outer London where cars are the main way that people get around. Effectively, the plan would fit a kind of taxi meter in every vehicle. Every time you move your car, the taxi meter would ring up a fare, which you would pay to Sadiq Khan. That's what he's working on. And what's frustrating is that it's obvious that he's working on it. There's you know, reams of evidence. We've read in the Times this morning, in the Mail on Sunday yesterday, in his own transport strategy that it's being worked on. They told us last year, they told us they had, you know, teams of people working on it. There ought to be, I think, a major public debate about it, whether you support or oppose it. And there isn't, because Sadiq Khan just has this ridiculous, implausible denial that he's even doing it.
Yeah, but if he is... Right, he's denying it's happening, which would put him in a very difficult position if it suddenly came in. So what you have to question politically, and there's elections coming up and all the rest of it, is this just a ploy from you Tories to say, oh, it's just another attack on motorists?
Well, I mean, you say... So ULEZ comes in tomorrow. So in July, just before it came... So he announced the consultation in March 2022. July 2021, so 8 months earlier, he denied any intention at all to expand ULEZ to the whole of London. Right. And then literally 8 months later, launched a plan to do exactly that. That's his MO. You know, his MO is to keep everything closed, don't tell anybody what he's working on until it's ready, then announce it as a fait accompli. And I think it drives this sense of cynicism in the public, which I think is really unhelpful, whether you support or oppose that policy.
Lots of people will be watching and listening to this up and down the country. They won't be in London. They'll see this as a London problem. But the fear is that this isn't a London problem. We could see these sorts of schemes rolled out across the country.
Potentially. I mean, I think there are two ways in which it's a non-London problem. Firstly, of course, people who don't live in London. I mean, I'm not originally from London. You know, people visit London, and it would mean not just driving into central London, which people generally don't do. It would be, you know, anywhere in the outskirts of London, any of the outer boroughs. If you drive in there from just outside, you would be caught. And then secondly, as you say, there's a potential for similar schemes to come in elsewhere. And actually, the Parliamentary Transport Select Committee looked at this a couple of years ago, and one of their conclusions was, if there is going to be such a scheme, it really has to be a national scheme, otherwise it would be chaos if you've got, you know, 50 separate different incompatible schemes.
You're Croydon and Sutton. I mean, will you fall under ULEZ?
Oh, yes. Well, so...
Because that's nowhere near London, really.
No,
it's a long way out.
Yeah, exactly. I got the 6:30 train to get here this morning. It's 12, 13 miles. There's no tube anywhere in Croydon or actually, or Bexley or Bromley or Kingston, for that matter. There's a great swathe of South London.
So what are your...
It is in ULEZ, yeah.
What are your constituents telling you, And I mean, it's people who want to use their cars, one thing. It's more the tradesmen, isn't it, who are reliant on their vehicles.
ULEZ is a big issue for tradesmen and vans, simply because to be compliant, diesel vehicles need to be only within about the last, since about 2016. Almost all vans are diesel, of course, and so it's much more difficult to get a diesel vehicle that's compliant. And there's this sort of horrible game of musical chairs where there just are not enough compliant diesel vans for all the people who want one, and so they're just looking at having to pay £12.50, which of course just becomes an inflationary pressure. They just pay that charge and pass it on to customers. And as you say, in places like Croydon, Sutton, it's not the urban metropolis, it's the suburban edge of London.
And Neil, it's the expense for people as well, isn't it? I mean, if you're looking to upgrade your vehicle in the cost of living crisis, for many people it's just not a possibility.
No, and actually that's, in many ways, I think one of the worst aspects of this is that you either have to pay £12.50 a day, which is just ludicrously unaffordable. It's like a sort of financial punishment beating, or you have to buy a new car. And Sadiq Khan would talk about his scrappage scheme. That's going to pay you about £2,000 towards a car, which is not enough to buy a new compliant car. And this is actually, interestingly, a lot of his Labour colleagues have been bringing up exactly that point. Including one of the Croydon Labour MPs, Steve Reed, he made that point. The Labour leader made that point. Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, made that point. He's just not listening. And I think when we think about the pay-per-mile stuff, his whole MO is just not to listen to anybody. And this is partly why I want to make sure, A, people are aware that it's happening, and B, that we ought to have some public debate so people can be aware of it and think about what...
Yeah, but don't your constituents, don't the good people of Croydon and Sutton want... maybe, less traffic on the streets, maybe, less pollution coming out of the back end of vehicles?
They do. I mean, well, the interesting thing about less traffic, of course, is everybody wants less traffic. Well, the other people generating less traffic, they themselves still want to drive.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the challenges I have with this, is that effectively, when you strip away the sort of PR waffle around it, it's a method of pricing people off the road. Well, who's that going to affect? To be blunt, it probably isn't going to affect me. I'm probably still going to be able to drive my car. It is going to affect lots of the less well-off people.
Yeah.
Places like New Addington, places like St Helier, big council estates in Croydon and Sutton, loads of tradesmen there, loads of people who do important but not always well-paid jobs. They need to get around, and they generally use cars, and they often use older cars.
Yeah. That's a very good point. Neil Garrett, good to see you this morning.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much. We are so hypocritical as people, and I apply that to myself. I remember I was thinking during lockdown, I was saying, it's so lovely, the roads are so quiet. Because I was driving everywhere. I was allowed to drive everywhere because journalists, you got these special passes to allow you to go to work and things. So we could use the roads, we could go out. But I said, isn't it lovely? What a shame when all the traffic started coming back.
And you'd love to drive.
But it's so hypocritical, wasn't it? Being a total hypocrite.
Yeah. Well, do let us know what you thought about Neil's points there. I know many of you will agree with him. gbnews@gbnews.com.
Yeah, and those who don't, those who think it's wrong, we like to have all sides of the argument on that one.
Yeah, all voices welcome here. Now let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories. And the Home Office is considering fitting migrants who enter the UK illegally with electronic tags. Officials are reportedly evaluating it as a way to prevent migrants who are unable to be housed in detention sites from absconding.
Senior Tory MPs are calling for an end to party infighting after Boris Johnson's supporter, Nadine Dorries, handed in her long-awaited resignation with a scathing attack on Rishi Sunak. She accused the Prime Minister of presiding over a zombie parliament.
Two major studies that have shown that ultra-processed foods significantly raise the risk of heart disease, heart attacks and strokes, with experts warning it could be a wake-up call for governments worldwide. Prevalence of heavy processed items such as ready meals and fast food has soared in recent years, with such products making up well over half of the average diet in the UK.
We do come up with some weird pictures.
Oh, what was with that?
If you're listening on the radio, I'll just say that when we're talking about heavily processed food, there was a bowl of chocolate ice cream with strawberries, fresh strawberries on top, and then someone sprinkling Smarties on top of that.
I think people get quite hungry.
I mean, which lunatic is making that for pudding? I don't know, ridiculous.
Oh, I made lovely pudding the other day.
Oh, did you? What did you
want to hear about it?
Yeah, I do.
So I've got really sweet tooth, if you don't know. And there was nothing...
She eats like you wouldn't believe, and there's nothing of her.
I do have a very sweet tooth, and there's nothing sweet in the cupboard, so as you know, I was in a state of panic. So I had some milk chocolate in the cupboard, just a little bit, so I melted that, and then I found some party rings, crushed them up, melted chocolate over the top, and then I found some mini marshmallows that I usually put on a hot chocolate, and it looked a little bit like that, to be honest, and it was a biscuity, chocolatey, marshmallowy, yummy, melted mix, and it was stunning. Just, that's what I make at home.
There you go.
Very, very good.
There you go.
So we're talking
That's
about
why you're the size of a house.
We're talking about being creative, though, and making things for yourself. I thought that was quite
Yeah, I don't think it falls into the health food
I don't
bracket.
think it's healthy, but I was quite impressed with myself.
Iced rings, did you have?
Party rings.
Party rings.
You know, the old
The
style biscuits.
The children's biscuits.
Yeah.
You had a packet of them in.
Random packet of those in the back of the cupboard, and I was mashing it all up, and it was great.
I mean, it sounds delicious, but you know,
It wouldn't be very good for you, darling.
No, I ate something
Sugar
very
levels.
bad last night. Anyway. So there you go.
So that was me getting creative in the kitchen. Do go in touch with your creative recipes, please. GBViews@GBNews.com.
What biscuits can you smash up?
Yes. Now, in royal news, is Prince Andrew back in the fold? The Duke of York was pictured being driven to church as the royal family gathered in Balmoral for their first summer holiday break since the death of the Queen.
Let's get the thoughts of royal historian Richard Fitzwilliams, who joins us now. Richard, always good to see you this morning. Are we reading too much into this or not?
Well, there's no doubt that whenever Andrew appears with members of the royal family, it is news, and they were clearly sending out a message of unity with Prince William driving him and Princess Catherine in the back seat to church yesterday. I mean, we're reading a certain amount into it simply because of the reports and the rumours that have been swirling around over recent months. We know that Andrew is unhappy. He always has been, losing his police protection. There have been reports that he's been trying to get that back. He lost it when he stepped down, of course, from royal duties. And then again, reports as to whether or not he would remain in Royal Lodge. I don't know that there was much substance to that, but insofar as this is concerned, very, very clearly the royal family are sending out the message that they are enjoying the summer holidays as a family. Apparently, all the members of the York family, including the Duchess, are at Balmoral, and also, of course, this is a particularly poignant period for the royal family and, in fact, for the nation, with the anniversary of the Queen's death so close.
Yes, of course, that's coming up very, very soon. Richard, what do you think has changed in recent months? Because we were talking about the coronation a little bit earlier on in the programme, and at the time, Prince Andrew did look very isolated. He did look very separate to the family. He did seem to be out on his own at that time. But we see here Prince Andrew sat in the front of the car with, as you say, Prince William at the wheel and Princess Catherine at the back of the car. They'll be aware of those optics, won't they? It's sitting next to the heir to the throne.
Oh, absolutely. But of course, the coronation was a public event. This was private, even though, of course, there were photographs. I mean, we're looking back to March 2022 with the memorial service at Westminster Abbey for the Duke of Edinburgh. I mean, we saw then Prince Andrew supporting the Queen, who, of course, as we well know, was supporting him during his travails, which the world heard about and which have done him so much damage. And that was heavily criticised, and there was no doubt that a lot of courtiers, I think, felt that there wouldn't be anything similar to that. And again, there is so little support for him. I mean, this, of course, dates back from the November 2019 car crash interview at Newsnight and then the subsequent developments. So obviously his appearances in any public forum, on any public event, I mean, that will be strictly limited. But the royal family are a family, and of course we know that he was particularly close to the late Queen, and little doubt that in the next few days it will be a very difficult period for him, as it will be for all members of the royal family. So from the point of view of the private point of view, then I think that it is showing clearly that relations are or appear to be unified. We know Prince William, for example, was particularly vociferous in insisting that he lost his patronages, military titles, use of HRH. I mean, that simply wasn't sustainable. But as a family, there's no doubt that this is symbolic of a show of unity and meant to send that message.
OK, Richard, good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda's been in touch on that story, saying, regarding Prince Andrew, has anyone thought it might be a private memorial service at the church for the late Queen? It's coming up to the first anniversary of her passing. After all, he is her son, whatever has happened.
Yeah, but I doubt they'll wait to the appropriate time. It's still a couple of weeks away, isn't it, or 10 days away. But it's a fair point.
Yeah. Now, let's go over the pond, shall we? Because Atlanta's District Attorney Fani Willis is set to outline her evidence against Donald Trump at a court hearing this morning, marking the first time that substantial arguments are being brought against the former president.
Yeah, it comes after Trump's legal team predicted that he will not stand trial in any of his charges until at least November next year, as court dates clash with the final stages of the 2024 presidential election.
Well, let's go now to Liz Mayer, political and communications consultant. Very good to see you this morning, Liz. So what are you expecting today from this hearing?
We'll have to see. I mean, I think she's laid out the charges pretty clearly so far, but it's always nice to actually hear things verbalized and what she intends to bring. So we'll see. And I expect what we will definitely see is quite a lot of fundraising activity by Donald Trump afterwards, because at the end of the day, he has brought in a lot of money from these indictments, but that is also being used to fund his legal defense. So he's going to have to do it. He's going to be sending a lot of emails.
Yeah, I mean, do you think hearing these charges and perhaps getting it in a bit more context rather than it just being sort of political analysis of what he's being accused of doing, is that likely to change any minds in his base or not?
I don't know, probably not within his hardcore base, no, but within the broader Republican Party that I think generally likes him, thinks a lot of this is politically motivated, maybe isn't completely sold on there being legitimate charges here. It may do, because I think there are a lot of people that I know who purport to follow politics quite closely, but they've actually missed that what the underlying charges are here. You know, he said this is all a matter of his free speech and him challenging the election because he believed that it was stolen, right? That's what he and his team have sort of put out there. But in actual fact, in this case, what's at issue is not sort of statements he made and then actions that may have resulted from them. What's at issue is actually perjury. It is literally signing forms where you are swearing an oath by signing the form, and the information contained in the form is untrue, or giving testimony where you have taken an oath to tell the truth, and then you have not done that, and that is demonstrably a fact. And this is all wrapped up in a sort of mob-esque or organized fashion, which then puts it under Georgia's very aggressive and very broad RICO statute, which is a bit different to some other states.
Liz, it is really quite extraordinary. Trump's campaign has raised $7 million since his mugshot was taken this week in Georgia. It does seem that every time he faces trial, and he's facing a number in the next 18 months or so, it only increases his popularity in his base.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. But I think it's also worth noting when people think about the political effects of that, $7.1 million, approximately $7.05 million of that amount is going to be going directly into his lawyers' pockets. So at some point, I don't know if his base is really going to think about this and what they're funding. But this is not something that necessarily helps him overall with the presidential campaign. In addition, keeping him off the trail is going to be really problematic. I mean, he skipped that debate last week, and I think he's the only candidate, based on internal polling that I saw, I think he's the only candidate who actually came out of that debate worse as a result of not having participated in it. Everybody else's numbers went up. I think maybe with the exception of some of Vivek Ramaswamy's numbers and then the former governor of Arkansas, who basically nobody is paying any attention to, his numbers were exactly static.
That's interesting. Liz, really good to see you this morning. Thanks very much indeed. It's trying to cut through all all the nonsense around all of this and get to some facts, isn't it? And when it comes to numbers, some people say, "Oh, the numbers went up, numbers went down," but you know, actually looking at the numbers makes a difference.
Yeah, do get in touch on that story, or indeed any of the stories that we're talking about this morning. gbnews@gbnews.com. But first, here's Craig Snell with your forecast.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to today, it's a dry and brighter day for most of us. Still a little bit of rain from time to time, but certainly feeling a bit warmer. So we start the day with some mist and fog around, also some fairly grey skies for parts of the Midlands and central southern England. But a lot of us seeing some sunny spells. However, the cloud will tend to bubble up as the day goes on. Also the risk of a few showers, especially across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, maybe even southeastern parts of England. But in the sunshine, feeling a little bit warmer, highs potentially reaching 21 or 22 degrees down towards the south. Into the evening, the showers beginning to fade away, so for a lot of England and Wales actually turning drier and clearer. Still going to see some showers for Northern Ireland and Scotland, especially along this band, which will just spread its way southeastwards as we go through the course of the night. Behind it, some blustery winds piling in behind, but for most, actually, temperatures staying in double figures as we start Tuesday morning. Could just fall down to around 5 to 6 degrees in some sheltered spots of England and Wales. So Tuesday morning, we start off with a mixture of cloud and some sunny spells. Still this line of showers, which will spread its way a little bit further into England and Wales as the day goes on. And then for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a mixture of sunny spells and blustery showers. Temperatures for most of us around where they should be for the time of year, but still feeling pleasantly warm in any sunshine across the southeastern corner.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now, as broadcaster Jeremy Vine suggests that drivers should have to pull over to let cyclists through, we'll debate if bike riders have become too militant on the roads. That will get you going. Stay with us.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. And action.
Sergeant Vickery, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Now, TV presenter Jeremy Vine has said, oh, do you know what, I've struggled with this because I like Jeremy.
I thought you would, yeah.
I like Jeremy. We went to see Dame Edna together once. Which is a weird thing, but we did. Nice fella. But on this, I struggle. He said drivers should give way to cyclists on the road, claiming that bikes are faster than cars in a lot of cases.
Well, Jeremy Vine is infamous for confronting drivers after filming them with his helmet camera and posting the videos on social media. And it's got many of you asking if cyclists are becoming too militant on the roads.
Well, Lewis Oakley is a learner driver and thinks that cyclists have too much power, but passionate cyclist Fran Foley-Winston thinks motorists go out of their way to make life difficult for cyclists. Good to see you both this morning. Fran, what are you on about?
Hello. I know it's not all motorists, OK, and I know there are some bad cyclists, particularly people on the pay-as-you-go bikes who I think haven't been on bikes since they were at school and suddenly just go crazy on the roads. But I've had examples where cars have driven into cycle lanes. I nearly lost my arm a couple of years ago when I was signalling to turn and a car literally swung into me, and it was literally nanoseconds and I could feel it whizzing by. It grazed my arm. My arm would have come off. I've had the cars driving into puddles because I think it's hilarious to soak you. I was forced onto a tram track by a car coming around a corner one day, and then my wheel got caught in the tram track and I went off my bike. And these are all in designated cycling areas. I'm not breaking any rules. I'm following the rules of the road. They're just 3 examples. There's probably loads more I could go into, but some of them the language probably wouldn't be appropriate for this hour. But it's unbelievable, and particularly with cycle lanes. I know some cycle lanes have had to put barriers up to stop the cars driving into them. And I just don't understand why we can't all live in unison. You know, particularly if you're following the rules of the road. I do wear the high vis, I do signal, I'm not going through red lights or anything. So if I'm being courteous to you, why can't they just be courteous to me?
Is this then something that you'd welcome, Fran? So what Jeremy Vine is suggesting, if a car sees you behind them in their mirror, they let you pass by?
Not necessarily, because, I mean, there's a lot of factors to take into account. There's the width of the road, the whole lot. It's not always practical to pull out and let somebody by. And, I mean, I know Jeremy Vine has said that he's faster than cars, but I'm just trying to get to point A to point B alive. So I'm not necessarily trying to, pass out every car on the road. But I do think, particularly, say, coming up to traffic lights, there's an awful problem where cars will squeeze together, bikes can't get through them. We're supposed to be up at the top of the traffic light for when the lights go green, and it is as if they do it deliberately. It happens so frequently. Either that or they have absolutely no spatial awareness, in which case I would question their qualifications to be on the road anyway. But there are a lot of factors to take into that. Not everybody is going at the speeds Jeremy is. Not everybody wants to go at the speeds Jeremy is. I know I certainly haven't, but I do think there could be a lot more courtesy on the roads.
Lewis, as someone who is learning to drive in all of this, I mean, do you think that you need to understand the needs of cyclists more, or should the car be king?
Well, I think the car is king, but with that comes a responsibility. It is my job as someone that is learning to drive to ensure the safety of everyone. And it'd be so much easier to do that if some cyclists, not all, would obey the laws of the road, because my reactions aren't as quick. It's not as slick as a driver at the moment. I'm learning to drive, so when it's a green light for me and I go, and a cyclist comes out of nowhere, it's a process to me. Do I slam on the brakes? Wait, what's behind me? Oh, it's too late. It's happened. So that's why, thank God, your driving instructor is there. But yeah, and you kind of see. I mean, you mentioned the bollards as well. Even now that you've got the cycle lanes with the bollards, not only are you worried as someone that's trying to figure out, wait, am I in the right position of the car that you're going to crash into them? But I've definitely had on multiple occasions an ambulance will come behind you, and then it's like, well, I can't pull in on the left because there's bollards, I can't go into oncoming traffic, and I can't go forward, so what are we going to do?
Do you think cyclists have become overly militant?
I think some cyclists have, and I think that, all we really need is for everyone to obey the laws of the road. And, my biggest issue with the cyclists that are naughty is not really as a learner driver, it's as a parent, because the amount of times I have got my 2 babies in the pram in front of me and step out onto a zebra crossing or at a normal crossing, and a cyclist just comes out of nowhere and misses your kids by inches. It's terrifying. Why do you need to do that? Where are you going? Why can you not obey the laws of the road? And you might say, well, it's not all cyclists that do that, but even if it's just 10%, we're human beings, and as parents, we are programmed to see danger. So if I have had, 10% of cyclists that have passed me by have just, weaved around my pram, or even I remember once when my other half was pregnant, one went so fast next to her pregnant belly, missed it by inches. It's like, you're a danger. Why are you not following the rules?
So, I mean, I tell you what I'm getting from this very clearly, Fran, is that, as you say, there are some irresponsible, bad drivers, and as Lewis says, there are some irresponsible and bad cyclists. That would seem to say the problem is reasonably straightforward. Whatever Jeremy Vine says, actually, it's back to your initial point. We all need to show respect for each other on the roads.
Well, yeah, I mean, they are vehicles. I know some people think of bikes and they think of them nearly as a toy, but they're not. They are vehicles. So, people should treat it like it's another vehicle on the road. I mean, I have to get my bike serviced, make sure that it's fit for the road and what have you, the same way that drivers do with their cars. And I do think, obviously, that a lot of people do respect that, but then there are those who don't. And maybe even having something like people have to do a cycling test before they're allowed on the roads or something might help, because I have encountered irresponsible cyclists as well. But I don't understand with motorists why they can't just basically stay in their lane. And the point about the bollards, they wouldn't have to put up bollards if motorists weren't going into the cycle lanes. So it's creating all sorts of problems just because people, those 10% or whatever figure, just aren't sticking to the rules. I genuinely do not know why any car would have to pull into the cycle lane. And quite often it does happen early in the morning. Maybe there's a traffic jam and they think they're going to get out a bit quicker, but it just causes all sorts of problems. And there's no need for it. They know the rules of the road, or they're supposed to know the rules of the road. And I know, it's not all motorists, but it's enough that it's causing problems and accidents.
But I think the problem here is that a lot of people will hear what you're saying, and that's fine, but then say, well, hold on, you're not accountable in any way. First of all, we've given you half the road and you don't pay road tax, 1. Number 2, and this is what I always think about when people come within inches of my kids at whatever speed they're going out on these bikes, is like, if you has hit my kid and broken their leg, I would never be able to find you. You don't have any sort of license plate or registration number. There's no way, you're totally unaccountable. And that's why it kind of feels to people on the streets and people in cars that it's like, oh, I'm a vehicle when it's convenient, but when it's not, then I'm a pedestrian and through the red lights I go.
Okay.
Well, I always consider it a vehicle, and I wouldn't have any problem with a registration or a tax. And I think a lot of the responsible cyclists who are using it as a mode of transport, who treat it as a vehicle, wouldn't have an issue with that.
Let's do it then.
Yeah, well, look, there you go.
I think we've actually reached a conclusion here, which is that everybody needs to stick in their lane. If everyone's just courteous to each other, then we won't have a problem. Lewis, Fran, we've got to leave it there, I'm afraid, but very, very good to see you both this morning. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Registration for bikes, I don't think it's a bad idea. Why not?
Fran's up for it. Yeah, she'd do it.
Although she's in Dublin.
She is. It's a great city.
It is a great city, but unfortunately we can't do anything about it over here, can we, in Dublin? But maybe they'll listen to us. I'll have a word with the Taoiseach. Anyway, we've got more on that biggest ever search for Nessie coming up as we go through the papers with Claire Pearsall and Candice Holdsworth.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Well, should we go through the papers?
Shall we?
I think we shall. Claire Pearsall is here alongside Candice Holdsworth. The last run out that we're giving you today. Morning to you both. Claire, can we start with the FT, please, and wealth tax? Now, this was in a lot of the papers yesterday as well, but it's worth... I mean, it seems on the surface to be a huge U-turn to say we're not going to do a wealth tax. I was talking to Annalise Dodds yesterday. She said, no, we've been very clear on this for a very long time.
I think this is the problem with the Labour Party, is they're not entirely sure what parts of policy they're going to have and what parts they're not. And, of course, some of the real Labour policies affect a lot of the people that are trying to woo over to vote for them in the next general election. And when you're starting to look at wealth tax, it's going to hit those people who would traditionally vote Conservative, who are traditionally older. So if you want to woo that type of audience, then you're looking at pensions, you're looking at wealth taxes, you're looking at inheritance taxes. And suddenly, the Labour policy doesn't seem quite so attractive. And it's quite interesting that not all of the front bench actually understand what it is that they're putting forward. So Rachel Reeves has come out there and said, no, this is it. We're going to have fiscal discipline, but we're not going to tax wealthy people anymore, which is so far removed from what Labour policy was and possibly should be, that I think people are going to get very, very confused, and they're already accusing Keir Starmer and his Labour Party of being sort of light blue.
There was some line yesterday which I wrote down. So the Labour Party saying the increased taxes doesn't bring about prosperity or national prosperity, which again is so sort of. Well, it's so opposite of Corbyn, but maybe that's the point.
Yeah, but I do think, though, that Rachel Reeves is a little politically idiosyncratic. I mean, she's got a track record in saying things that you're like, oh, I would not have expected that from a Labour politician, especially around tax. She does seem to be a bit more fiscally conservative on these issues. In fact, in many ways, I really like Rachel Reeves just as a person. She comes across as very sensible to me, and she always has. I think she's always said things that I really agree with. But the thing is, how are Labour perceived as a whole? And, you know, whereas I think Rachel Reeves is quite a solid sort of person, I think that Keir Starmer, much less so. And, you know, it's not very clear where he sits politically. At one point he was a radical, now he seems to be trying to capture the centre ground, and I don't think it's that credible.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Candice, let's stick with you, shall we? The front page of the Mail. And tell us a bit more about this rainbow badge scheme.
Yes. So this is in the Daily Mail. So a number of NHS trusts have signed up to something called the Rainbow Badge Scheme. And I think it's run by certain lobby groups like Stonewall. And they basically mark you up or down based on whether you use gender-neutral language. So are you using the word parent instead of mother? Are you saying women's health rather than just talking about, like, general procedures? And it's come in for a lot of criticism, as these things tend to do, because people want to use very specific language. They want to say mother, they want to say women. And so this has caused a bit of anger that the NHS is signing up to these schemes.
But isn't... One would presume... that actually this is not just about the language, it's about the bigger issue around the Rainbow Badge Scheme would be the sort of respect for LGBT patients and their partners or husbands and wives, or all that stuff. And actually some of these controversial gender things will just be like a tiny little bit at the end, I think.
Well, so I think we need to have that debate. So yes, there is that, certainly, absolutely. And you do need to, say you have a transgender man giving birth, you need to know how to care for that person in that specific scenario. So I think that's very good. I would say, though, things like not having specific terms to talk about women's health issues like postnatal depression, for instance, I don't agree with that. So, I mean...
But you can't talk... You see, that's right. That's where I do struggle a little bit. Why can't you talk about postnatal depression?
Well, you should be able to, and I agree that you have to look at families who are made up very, very differently, and you have to be able to be flexible with who you're talking to, understand the sort of nuances of family life, but you also don't erase women. We have fought so long and hard to get conditions recognised, to have discussions around women's health to be put on television. I mean, 5 years ago, nobody mentioned the menopause.
No.
And now we have much more of an understanding.
Can't get away from it now.
Yeah. You can't get away from it now, and rightly so. And it needs to be out there, and it needs to be spoken about. And I don't want it to go backwards.
No, you see, I'm all for if for whatever reason somebody needs a gender-neutral term, let's use it.
Yeah.
But that I don't see why you would then need to stop using anything else.
Yeah, why do they need to be at odds with each other? And I think that's what everyone's saying. But I think the problem is sometimes it does, and people, you know, lose that sort of subtlety and nuance. I mean, I do think, you know, when you're when you're with someone in one of those situations, they're giving birth, I think you should just be respectful towards what they want in that situation. And I think that's very important. And I think that's easy to do.
It's common sense. It is just common sense, and it's respect towards people, and surely that's what it really comes down to, is respecting the person who is in front of you.
Which is what, in a way, what the Rainbow Badge Scheme should operate. So you are respectful to whoever that person is.
Should be that way, but that should be common sense.
That's common sense.
It seems obvious. I mean, I don't know why it has to be politicised.
Maybe we should all just be in charge. Maybe that would be the answer to everything. Claire, shall we have a look at the eye, shall we? And the Spanish football kiss row, it rumbles on, doesn't it?
It does rumble on, and this is quite an interesting article. This is Rebecca Reed writing her own experiences of being a woman and allowing a certain amount of behaviour to be gotten away with, because as girls we are taught, well, and certainly I was, that you didn't make a fuss and you had to be nice, and girls were sort of sugar and spice. And it's only as I've grown up I've realised that's utter rubbish. And you don't need to be like that. You can be forceful, you can be sure of your own opinion, but it's sort of with this whole fight around the Spanish kiss, which is wrong. I want to put that solely out there.
Yeah.
It should not have happened. And the doubling down of the Spanish boss was awful. And I think women need to be able to stand up for themselves without being called aggressive, which is normally what happens. But also, I think we need to look at how we bring up girls and boys, because you can't just have everything for one gender and say boys are nasty. And as the mother of a son, I've had that levelled at me, that my son was the problem, it wasn't the girl, when clearly it was just children.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be a little bit careful, but girls, definitely, you need to be able to stand up for yourself without being called aggressive, rude or nasty, whereas when men do it, they are confident.
Yes, and saying no as a girl and setting a boundary, you know, because sometimes you hear that, you know, young girls will say, well, I didn't want to hurt his feelings. It's like, no, if you don't like someone and you don't want to be with them, you can set that boundary, and that's no problem whatsoever.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, Rebecca makes this point. She says, if you are raised with sweetness being the ultimate goal, then you arrive in adulthood as a woman, unable to tell men, even in your own homes, or, in this case, the Spanish football chief kissing you on the world stage, to get lost.
Yes.
Yeah. To say no.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's...
Fair
we've lost that ability. And it's very, very sad that we can't drill that into people, that actually, if you say no, you mean no, and there's no sort of nuance around it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a perfectly valid point. Candice, we've got 45 seconds to talk about Nessie in the Telegraph.
So there's so many stories about the Loch Ness Monster at the moment. What is the ongoing fascination with the Loch Ness Monster?
Because we still haven't found her. She's there somewhere.
Why do people...
You be very careful what you say.
Even to believe her, yes.
Are you?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Why? What is it about it that captured it? I'm not saying it judgmentally. I'm fascinated by people who are fascinated by the Loch Ness Monster.
Because she isn't... If you go up there, you can tell she's there.
Oh,
You can tell she's there.
Feeling.
Yeah, the mystique of the...
feeling.
It's so big. Loch Ness is so huge. But she's down there in the depths.
There's a really good piece in The Spectator about that this weekend. Someone who lives on the loch, and he said he's been watching it for years, looking out for her. And he said, it's very similar to what you said. He said, she's in there somewhere.
Yeah.
She is.
Yeah, but anyway, they didn't record these gloops properly, did they?
No, yeah, so they thought that they'd heard something, but now they think it could have been ducks or something.
No, it's
It's
just...
ducks, there you go.
It's not ducks,
Stephen.
she was there, she was talking to us.
It's ducks.
You've got to keep the faith. Claire, Candice, it's been really good to see you both.
Yeah,
Thank you
so
very
good.
much
Thank
indeed.
you so much. Now here's Craig.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to today, it's a drier and brighter day for most of us. Still a little bit of rain from time to time, but certainly feeling a bit warmer. So we start the day with some mist and fog around, also some fairly grey skies for parts of the Midlands and central southern England. But a lot of us seeing some sunny spells. However, the cloud will tend to bubble up as the day goes on. Also the risk of a few showers, especially across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, maybe even southeastern parts of England. But in the sunshine, feeling a little bit warmer, highs potentially reaching 21 or 22 degrees down towards the south. Into the evening, the showers beginning to fade away, so for a lot of England and Wales actually turning drier and clearer. Still going to see some showers for Northern Ireland and Scotland, especially along this band, which will just spread its way southeastwards as we go through the course of the night. Behind it, some blustery winds piling in behind, but for most, actually, temperatures staying in double figures as we start Tuesday morning. Could just fall down to around 5 to 6 degrees in some sheltered spots of England and Wales. So Tuesday morning, we start off with a mixture of cloud and some sunny spells. Still this line of showers, which will spread its way a little bit further into England and Wales as the day goes on. And then for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a mixture of sunny spells and blustery showers. Temperatures for most of us around where they should be for the time of year, but still feeling pleasantly warm in any sunshine across the southeastern corner.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Coming up, we'll have more on the Home Secretary's plan to see that the police investigate every minor offence. Stay with us.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. And action.
Sergeant, the big read, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock on Monday, the 28th of August. Today, the Home Secretary calls for a crackdown on petty crime. She says the police must investigate every theft.
Nearly a third of councils in low-income areas are considering bankruptcy as the leading local government warns some local authorities have nothing left.
Donald Trump faces another court milestone today when the Fulton County District Attorney lays out her arguments relating to alleged attempts to overthrow the 2020 election.
half of foods in our diet can lead to strokes and heart attacks. That's according to a new study. Experts say the research into ultra-processed foods should be a wake-up call to the government.
And coming up, we'll have all your latest forecasts with Craig.
Good morning. It's a bank holiday for most of us today. Will the weather spoil things? Find out in a little bit.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Well, the cycling issues got you worked up this morning. I have to say...
We knew it would.
Yeah, and you're all quite anti-cyclists. I can understand. I mean, my family do a lot. So my dad and my brother do a lot of cycling. So I try to be pro-cyclists, though they're not riding through cities or towns or things, or on the country roads. But you do see a lot of bad cycling going on.
You do.
I have to say. Rose says riding a bike on a pavement is not legal, but cyclists are always doing it and asking pedestrians to get out of their way. It's true.
Yeah, Mel says Sunderland Council have spent a lot of taxpayers' money implementing a cycle lane along the coast there. Yet the promenade, which is meant for pedestrians and dog walkers, are being plagued by cyclists using the promenade as a racetrack.
And Angela says cyclists are not a paragon of virtue. Saw one a couple of days ago riding up the middle of a busy road, no hands on the handlebars, texting on his phone. And you do see a lot of that sort of thing going on, or going through traffic lights and all that sort of thing. But then you do have bad drivers as well who cut cyclists up and don't give them the respect or the space that they need. So we've all got to improve, haven't we? We've all got to improve.
Need to respect one another, don't we? Let us know. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Now, the Home Secretary has told police they must investigate every theft and says the ignoring of low-level crime is unacceptable.
Well, Suella Braverman has secured agreement from all of the country's 43 police forces to pursue every offence where there is a reasonable line of inquiry.
Well, it follows concerns that theft has essentially become decriminalised because of the extremely low rate of cases being solved or even investigated.
Well, GB News' political editor Christopher Hope joins us now from our Westminster studio. Good morning to you. And the studio looks great behind you as well. What do you make of this new plan?
Well, for many it might seem unusual for the Home Secretary to tell police forces to investigate all crimes. It's what should be happening, many might think. But in fact, it hasn't been. If you look at the rates here, in the 12 months to March, someone was charged with a vehicle theft just 2% of times, and bike thefts, 4% in burglaries, 6.5% in muggings. And the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, is keen to build on an idea first done by Greater Manchester Police, which looked at they've investigated every single crime, or most crimes, on their one that coming their way. They've seen a 44% increase in their work and prosecution. So the idea is to try and crack down on all the minor crimes, and hope that might instill more confidence in our policing.
Yeah, well, and you can, as you rightly say, broadly welcomed by people. You can see the sense in it. But there's two issues, isn't there? I mean, the first one is it going to detract from investigating more serious crimes? And that's all down to the numbers we've got to work on this.
Well, that's right. The government would say there were 20,000 more police. Of course, that's not many per force. But the idea is, if you crack down on the small stuff, then that becomes a trend, and the bigger crimes can also be investigated. We'll wait and see. Labour, of course, is not very impressed by this. They say it shows 13 years of failure by the government, and they're really pursuing CCTV leads, that kind of thing, is what the police should be doing. But they will now, for the first time, or in some cases, say if you've got any doorbell footage or CCTV camera footage, we will look at that and try and deal with this acquisitive crime. I think for many people, when you come across a burglary, when it impacts on you, or robbery, it's so traumatising, and then for the police not really to care, or seem not to care, is quite damaging in trust. And many of us know stories of that from friends or family. So I think it's an attempt by Suella Braverman to put faith and trust back in policing.
OK, Chris Hope, really good to see you this morning, live from our Westminster studio.
Let's talk to former Chief Superintendent of the Met, Parm Sandhu, who joins us now. Really good to see you, Parm. oh, excuse me, what's your take on this? Because obviously police officers are hugely stretched. I'm sure they would all want to investigate the crimes that affect us all, but it's whether or not it's feasible to do it.
Good morning. Yes, it does sound very sensible and it does sound very practical as well. I do have to disagree with a couple of points that Christopher made. There are not 20,000 extra police officers. There are 3,500. The 20,000 made up the people who left, who have retired, resigned, and left for various reasons. So there's only actually 3,500 across the country. And Christopher also mentioned Greater Manchester Police and the increase, 44% increase in recorded and investigated crime. Just over a year ago, they were a failing force. They were put in special measures because they were not recording reports that were made to them. So the figures have been used have been slightly misleading in my view. And I think that most police officers want to go to work and they want to do a good job, but the lack of resources prevents them from doing that. Members of the public do want police officers to turn up when they're burgled, when their car's stolen, when their phone is stolen. But compared to 2010, complex cases are a lot more difficult to solve. You've got child abuse cases, you've got sexual offences, and a lot of them will involve phones. So it involves downloading material, which in 2010 didn't take very long and there wasn't that much material on devices. So cases have got complex, but the resources have not increased. And put on top of that, the amount of resource that is required for protests, the type of protests have changed since 2010, and that requires a lot more police officers. So although this sounds good on paper, practically, I don't think it's going to make much difference.
Do you think there is a real, genuine concern that this could take resources away from high-harm crimes, as you might deem them, such as rape, sexual assault, murder?
In relation to the politics of this, when politicians get involved in policing, they require them to send in returns. How many crimes have you reported? How many have been investigated? What are your figures? And that in itself will put pressure on policing. So they will take police officers away from other areas to do this. And one of the quotes in the article is about for a 3-month period, the Met Police investigated theft of motor vehicles, and they had an increase in arrests and recovery of vehicles. Those officers would have come from somewhere. They would have come from a department that deals with sexual offences, child abuse, anything else to make those figures look good. But then they go back to their day jobs and now they've got a backlog. And even in relation to policing, even when people are charged, there's a backlog at courts. This is about the whole criminal justice system not having the right resource to actually deal with these criminals and bring them to court and give them the justice that they deserve.
But in one sense, and I totally understand what you're saying and the frustration there must be amongst officers up and down the country, but this is almost a sort of statement of intent from the Home Secretary, isn't it? It may not be feasible to do it right now, and there are some caveats in there about having reasonable lines of inquiry to follow up. But as a statement of intent, it's got to be a good thing. But as you say, it's obviously going to require a big boost to the numbers, the funding, the resources to actually make it work.
All police officers up and down this country want to do a good job, and they will look at this as a statement of intent, and they will welcome the pressure behind it or the rhetoric behind it. It's just not enough to make the statements without giving people the right resources and the tools to do their job. And I don't think that they have done that. And even when they're using Greater Manchester as an example, that was a failing force. They were not on the same, they weren't on a level playing field. So they're beating the police up for not doing their jobs, but they're not actually assisting police officers to do their jobs.
No, that's a fair point.
The statistics are stark, though, aren't they, Palm? I mean, in half of neighbourhoods in England and Wales in 2020, not a single car or bike theft or personal theft was solved. Half of neighbourhoods. I mean, if this does anything, there must be something to be said for public trust in policing and just for the public to see police, to take crimes such as theft seriously. Well, that's a benefit, isn't it?
Oh, I think she's... No, she's lost us.
She's
lost us. There you go. That's the old internet for you this morning. But Palm making some really good points, and I'm sure it's what, if you're a police officer, I'm sure it'd be what you think you do. You want to do this.
Yeah.
You want to solve these crimes or deal with these crimes that that affect us as everyday people.
Well, probably what you went into policing to do, to actually solve crime on the streets. Bobby's on the beat, old-style policing.
It's the old Dixon and Doc Green. Isn't
Dixon and Doc Green.
Oh, no, yeah, but way before your time. Actually, a little bit before my time, to be fair, Dixon and Doc Green.
What, you're talking about yourself, then?
No. It's an old TV show, but a lot of people refer to Dixon and Doc Green. He was a Bobby on the beat. Getting to know his local community, dealing with local crimes. If something went wrong, he knew who the perps were, all that sort of thing. But it's proper, good, old-fashioned policing. But it's having the numbers to do it.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
And lots would welcome it, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Right, 9:30 today, we've got Britain's Newsroom with Tom and Emily, and they're here in the studio with us now to tell us more. Good morning to you both.
Good morning. Good morning. It may be a bank holiday weekend, but there's certainly not a dearth of stories to get diving into. It feels like there's a really busy news agenda, not least, I think, a big focus today on crime. All sorts of crime, not just theft, but also how the police are operating. We're speaking to some people with really intimate knowledge of the policing situation in this country and just how feasible all of these new challenges are.
Yeah, well, it sounds like a pet programme. Emily?
We're going to be doing so much. There's so many political stories. Kemi Badenoch is back from India. We'll be talking a little bit about that trade deal. Also, wealth tax. Labour aren't going to introduce one, so that's quite interesting. Momentum and the lot aren't very happy.
And a little bit of insider GB News gossip as well. I'm very excited about this. If we can get it up and running this morning, and we might, we'll have Chris Hope, our new political editor, coming to us from our new studio, which hasn't yet been fully built yet, but we should have a down-the-line point coming from Westminster, not standing outside in the rain anymore, but actually inside a cosy studio. So a very exciting thing for GB News viewers to see if we get it up and running.
We've just done it, Tom.
Oh, no.
We've beaten you to it.
You beat us to it,
Sorry.
Stephen.
Sorry.
Stephen, what are you like? I'm trying to tease
never
things
liked
and...
to be second.
Oh,
Sorry.
Outrageous. Well, we'll get him to pan the camera around. You've taken the wind out of my sails there. I am appalled.
I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll take the wind out your sails a bit more, because we're going to talk to Justin Madders, the Shadow Minister for Employment Rights, who joins us this morning, though not from our Westminster studio, sadly, but really good to see you this morning. Look, because you've been talking about it so much today, can I just get your thoughts first and foremost about this move from Suella Braverman? Every theft must be investigated, she says. Well, the sentiment's really good, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose most people will be asking themselves what's been happening for the last 13 years of a Conservative government if crimes have not been investigated. But it is, I'm afraid, a reflection of what I hear from constituents and my own experience, that sometimes the police just don't have the resources to investigate the crimes. In fact, 90% of crimes go unsolved, and I think that it's a sad state of affairs that this is something that's been presented as a new, exciting policy when it's something we should have been doing all along.
You're here to talk to us today about cancer care. This is new analysis that shows 1 in 5 patients with cancerous tumours have to wait more than 2 months to have them removed in some parts of England. It does appear to be a postcode lottery in terms of NHS cancer care at the moment. How would Labour fix that?
Well, I think, like a lot of things in the NHS, you're not going to have an overnight solution. But what we committed to is a great expansion of the NHS workforce, getting more doctors and nurses into the NHS, and that's going to be funded by the removal of the non-dom status. It's clear, unfortunately, that the 2-week limit that was originally a target in terms of cancer treatment has been effectively abandoned by this government. And as we know, getting the right treatment at an early stage is absolutely vital for the best outcomes for cancer. So I'm afraid these figures show a very, very worrying picture across the UK.
Yeah, but Andrew Gwynn, your shadow public health minister, has said receiving fast and quality cancer care should not depend on your postcode. Which sounds like a great headline, but NHS care in this country has depended on your postcode for generations, actually. I mean, certainly well within the last Labour government. So what makes you think you can fix it now?
Well, we're putting a greater focus on dealing with these inequalities across the country. And as you quite rightly point out, this is not new. You can actually look at life expectancy across the UK and see that people can have vastly different life expectancies if they live sort of only 10 or 15 miles away from each other. And that's, I'm afraid, something that is unacceptable in a civilized society. We want people to have the same life experiences, the same life chances. We need to have a higher standard across the whole of the NHS. We'll do that by investing in the workforce and putting it on a sustainable footing for the future.
OK, Mr Madders, whilst we've got you, I just want a quick word on the ULEZ expansion tomorrow. It is controversial, especially here in London. It's been attacked as an attack on the working class and on motorists as well. Is Labour launching a war on cars with this?
No, we're not launching a war on cars. Look, I represent a constituency that builds vehicles, so I'm certainly in the camp of the motorists. But what I think we have to say is, first of all, if you want to deal with air pollution, you've got to come up with a plan to tackle it. The government insisted that Sadiq can't come up with a plan. Clearly, there is an issue at the moment about the affordability of these proposals, given that we've got a massive cost of living crisis. So we think he should be looking at pausing this at the very least, whilst we're in this very difficult situation.
So that's what you'd say to him today, don't launch it tomorrow?
Yeah.
OK, well, that's a clear message. I don't think he's going to listen, though. Justin Madders, good to see you this morning. Thank you.
Very interesting.
Yeah,
within
well,
the Labour Party.
They're trying, yeah, not sort of rowing back from it completely, but they are trying to sort of have that sort of split from Sadiq Khan, aren't they? Which is a very interesting move.
Yeah, very, very interesting. But do stay with us. We're going to discuss the significance of Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech. It's been 60 years on since that was made.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GBNews,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Martin Luther King had a dream 60 years ago. It's a remarkable anniversary. Let's talk to our colleague Nana Akua, who joins us now. Good to see you, Nana. It's remarkable, this piece of incredibly important piece of history, and you have to say things have changed dramatically in just 60 years.
Well, I think he would be proud if he were to look down and see that I, as a black person, can do anything that somebody who's white can do. And also that if you went somewhere in the world, most places would acknowledge that as well. So I think the job in that respect has been done. But I think he would actually be quite horrified at some of the seeds of racism that seem to be re-implanted in a sense. I mean, some of the most recent examples, you've had things like Black Lives Matter, which, turned out that in particular the one in America, they misappropriated funds and kind of took advantage of what they would call white guilt. In this country, we've had theatres having black-only performances. The performance of Tambo and Bones at the Stratford Theatre in London, they had one night only where only black people could go, which, again, I think is reinventing the seeds of racism and is actually, in somewhat, the language of apartheid. Then we've had this phrase, the global majority, to remind white people that they are not the majority globally, but in certain countries they may well be. So I think, and then you've got things like critical race theory, where we are told that actually black people are oppressed and white people have privilege. And so I think he would look at a lot of this, especially the diversity and exclusion, I call it, where there seems to be a way of excluding white people, where he would probably look at that and say that ultimately we are heading towards a reverse racism and that we're going backwards. But, I mean, if we can, people, obviously in GB News we get a chance to talk about these things. A lot of the left wing in particular won't talk about it, and there seems to be an investment in holding on to racism. So you've got race baiters, I like to call them that. Otherwise they may call themselves activists, sowing the more seeds of division, and it's in their interest because they're making money out of it. So in some respects, racism has become big business, and that's disappointing. But overall, he would see that actually we are heading to a place where most people will be mixed race. So hopefully there will be no racism.
Yeah, well, look, fingers crossed. But you as always, you raised some really valid points. Nana, I'm really sorry. It's tight for time this morning, but thank you very much indeed. Good to see you.
Yeah, really, really good to see you. That's it from us this morning.
Yes, I'm closing my
it's been
computer.
very good to be with you again this morning. And Eamonn and Isabel will be back from 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Now let's get the weather with Craig's now.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to today, it's a drier and brighter day for most of us. Still a little bit of rain from time to time, but certainly feeling a bit warmer. So we start the day with some mist and fog around, also some fairly grey skies for parts of the Midlands and central southern England. But a lot of us seeing some sunny spells. However, the cloud will tend to bubble up as the day goes on.